Okay, can you hear us, Ben?
Sure can.
Great.
We're just waiting on the live stream to YouTube to start. I'll let you know as soon as we're there.
Thank you.
Okay, we appear to be live on YouTube. I'm going to pull up the agenda and we can get started. Okay, great. I think we're ready to go. You all are ready to start whenever.
Thank you.
Do we want to put the,
Awesome.
do we want to put the general plan up there? Well, we could do it. Okay.
So I think maybe I will represent Forest in a very underserving capacity. I don't want to overstate that representation in any way. So to go through the formalities in a much inferior way as Forest would do if you were here. Welcome. And I will give the call to order. And on the agenda, first up, we have introductions. So if we want to start with maybe the people in this room and then go to the folks that are joining remotely, maybe that'd be great. I'm Melissa and I'm a member of the board and I'm filling in for Forrest today, again in an inadequate capacity.
I'm Ashley Kornblatt, I'm a member of the board.
Mary McGann, non-voting member and commissioner.
Randy Martin, member of the board.
Chris Wilson, member of the board.
Is that everybody in the room? Sorry. Jasmine Duncan, non-voting member of the board.
Dave Sackerson, voting member of the board.
Ben Alter, Grand County Assistant Director of Economic Development, not a member of the board, just a staff advisor.
Perfect. And I think since this is a special meeting, we don't have citizens to be heard and can move straight into presentations, of which Ben has done an incredible job kind of putting together a flow and a cadence for the meeting.
Thank you. I'm confirming that everyone can see my screen with the agenda. And when I click here, we're now taking a look at, let's see, this chart that I'm about to open up. Let's see, is everyone seeing this recommended process?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I also just want to let everyone know that I am right next door to the conference room. So sorry if that's weird or if there's any sound bleed through. So I wanted to make this brief. Everything we're working on today is the discretion of the board. I'm really excited to see the board take on moving forward the strategic plan. In the previous days leading up to this, after our last meeting, I've been working with our new planning and zoning director, Amy Weiser, as well as the commission administration team to understand what would be the best process for moving this forward. And what the consensus is that the best process will likely look like a tandem approval of the new healthy economy section to the general plan and the approval of the Trail to Tomorrow plan side by side. So our office and this board, to a lesser extent, has been invited to begin revising that healthy economy section with that Trail to Tomorrow plan as our reference. The Trail to Tomorrow plan would become an appendix to that section. So we are writing a new section, but I think seeing as how we do have a great plan that's already been written, I don't think we need to kind of reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So I put together this process. I'm not going to read it. I think I just surmised it, but I wanted to see if anyone had any questions about what we've laid out here.
Well, I just want to add that there may be, like, I think when everything you described was good, but the way, when you said approval, I mean, I think that part of what we need to do is sort of, let's see, what's the right word? Gut check, really, these recommendations, and see if they need any little bit of tweakage based on what we know. I mean, I work with a lot of consultants that do this type of facilitation and create these plans, and sometimes they don't go quite deep enough, or there's a little bit of a generic statement that we could do a better job with what we know. So I think that part of what we want to do is gut check what's in the Trail to Tomorrow plan as we make that suggestion for what should be added. Because just that's our role, because we're the folks on the ground here, double checking what their observations were and adding or taking away as we see needed. And it shouldn't be a huge deal, but we should definitely be workshopping some of these ideas a little bit to see if we can do a better job either expressing them or supporting them or something. So that's what I was hoping we'd get to do today. And I think that fits in.
Great point.
Because if it was just a straightforward transfer, we wouldn't be here for 3 hours. So.
And I would like to just comment that thank you, Ben, for reaching out to those entities, to Amy and to the staff. I think knowing, that makes me feel really comfortable about what we're doing, because nobody's toes are going to feel like they've been stepped on. So thank you for seeing that and taking the initiative, because that was going to be my first suggestion today. Now I don't have to do it.
Ben, can I ask you a question about the process?
Yeah,
So-
absolutely.
So, I mean, it sounds like what I heard there is that you and the department are comfortable then taking kind of the lead on doing the actual rewrite, or is that something? I mean, I guess my question here is, in what format would what we're trying to do here be most useful? Like, is creating language the most useful thing, or just like getting, or is it more useful to just get you some bullet points of things that we think are key to have included, and then let you do the rest of the kind of creation of the whole structure? Because I think we all, do have some things that we think are really important that will be included, but yeah, I just want to make sure we do it in a way that's most sort of efficient and effective in coordination with the department.
It's a great question. I appreciate that. I think that there's room for participation on both ends of that spectrum, but I would say that the more effective use of your time would probably be the latter, putting together those bullet points and working on advising the revision of the general plan language at a bit of a higher level. And I say that just because the reality is that writing this plan is going to be a lot of going back and forth with the planning and zoning department. And while I would appreciate you all helping me out, it's also not really it's also like not really in your bylaws. It's not really an expectation of yours. So I want you all to focus on the thing that you're here for most. And I think to Ashley's point, the strategic plan has a lot of great ideas, but part of this plan that we've laid out here for approving it is approving alongside it something that's generated from the board and says, well, based on the goals and the lofty things that are laid out in the plan, here are results and here's actions we're going to take. And I think that alone is a good amount of work in itself. And it sounds like that's, part of the workshop focus today. So I would say that, personally, I'd love to see the board's priority be that. And I think that as you go through that, it will naturally speak to the general plan process of us revising this section. And it'll help us a lot, but I don't expect you all to be writing it with us and doing the language every step of the way. I think that's just an unrealistic ask. If it's something you want to do, like, sure, but I don't know. I've met planners who aren't stoked on this, so I don't know why you all would be. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thanks, Ben. Pardon me.
So yeah, I want to help facilitate this meeting in the best way possible today. So I have this chart here. I'm glad to pull up the plan. We can talk about it. I don't know if folks had a format with which they think the best way to do this is. I'm glad to pull up a live document and take notes based on input that we can all see. But I'm here to support this effort. So you all let me know how I can help you.
Well, I think,
Yeah, what do you think?
I think what we should do now is maybe each one of us tell us from what we read in the Trails to Tomorrow, what stands out or what do each one of us see as a priority? And then go from there as on the things that we're very common on. Or like, that's an idea.
Well, I would go just a step before that might be, like a quick looking at the general plan. What is, how general is it? Like, if we're gonna connect to that, what are the points there that we would connect to in the general plan? I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly where the general plan sort of leaves off. And as you said, you know, it's a short part of it, this
I
connection.
think it should be a bigger part.
Right. And so,
Ashley, can I jump in with something real quick?
sure.
So is the question I'm hearing from you how we connect our process with the Trail to Tomorrow plan to the entire general plan as opposed to just the healthy economy section?
No, it's more like, it's a little more granular than that. Like in the healthy economy section, I guess I'm just looking for some big categories, right? That then we can attach, that we can work through as like modules. So
Yeah,
it starts out with,
I think we should rework the categories, to be honest.
okay, great.
I'm with
I
you.
just don't, I mean, I think once we do that, we might need to go back and make sure there's nothing really important that we missed in our categories, or if we need to add an extra one or something like that to capture something. I mean, for example, the general plan section, it actually like incorporates health
Mhm.
issues into the economic issues and the healthy economy, like somehow those two words like
Yeah.
also mean and health.
Trauma-informed policies may not necessarily be
Yeah,
useful or
which might be-
instructive for us. to-
Yeah, and it may be really important that
Like-
there's somewhere in the general plan, but like maybe the health needs to be spun off into its own chapter if it needs to be there, or
I agree with you
Oh.
because it is a big issue.
Well,
It's a
here's
lot.
the,
so, I mean, I think that working through from, in terms of categories, I mean, this is just my own take on it, but would be that we actually work from the Trail to Tomorrow,
Yes.
which offers some categories, and then we say,
Yes.
does that serve us? And,
Okay.
and, you know, what can we do under those? And then we can figure out,
Great.
because I mean, really, it's,
It's,
I think
okay.
it was written many
That's
years
great.
ago, and
That's great,
it's
but
on a
here's
different set of things.
here's the pushback on the health thing. real
Yeah.
bit.
Okay,
So what's happening now is, the macro trends are that communities that have access to the outdoors, convenient access to the outdoors for as many of their citizens as possible, are healthier. Like, it's a thing.
Mhm.
And so that would be like part of what we're talking about is, I mean, what attracts people to Moab? What attracts business investment in Moab? Why would a business want to be here, or a business owner or an independent contractor? Like, why do they live here?
totally.
And one of the reasons they live here is the access to the public land.
And I would think of that as when you look at the way the Trail to Tomorrow structure is set up, is that's under the fundamentals.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, there we go.
Yes.
And so I don't think we need to get rid of it, but maybe it also deserves its own section, general plan. I leave that to commissioners to sort of like make that decision eventually. But because like something like, if you look at just the chapters in the general plan,
Yeah.
something like parks gets its own chapter, right? So like that matters too, right? I mean, that's tied to the economy. There are lots of things in there that are tied and important to the economy and growing the economy, but they don't necessarily fit solely as a subset underneath
Yes.
economic
Okay.
issues. So we have to, I mean, we can consider that
Well, and
as we move
maybe
forward.
out of the process that you're recommending, and it's fine, I agree, is, there are a couple it feels like that if we can get agreement on a couple of, overall principles, like that the more people, the easier access it is to the outdoors. Like easy access to the outdoors, from what I see, and this is what all these other communities around the West are working to achieve. If they get easy access to the outdoors, that means they are a gateway community. They are that gateway. You got to actually be a gateway. You actually have to have access to the outdoors. And so if you have that access, then all kinds of things happen. You have the opportunity to invite visitors and take care of them, and you invite business investment because you attract it because people are looking to live where they can get outside. So I guess maybe there's a way either, but we can start, as you suggest, through in the plan. But part of it, if we get some general principles out there for the commission to think about, and if they can say, okay, yes, we all agree that access to the outdoors is important to the modern economy, then that sort of helps the acceptance of the further details because you've agreed on the principle.
I think two things, so I've got two things to follow up to what the two of you said. I absolutely agree. I feel like the place to start, and Mary, looking at you as a representative of the commission and kind of giving feedback about what you think is helpful, not helpful at the commission level. I have two pieces of input. The first one is I'm a structural thinker.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like starting with the Trails to Tomorrow is really helpful because structurally, the way that they've laid it out is structurally aligned with how we run our county government. So Ben, looking to you on this one. We had said in our economic advisory meeting, which is why we're here, is, hey, we would like to take this really nebulous policy and this feedback and this information, and we would like to move it down into actionable items so that the rubber can hit the road. And ideally for us, before we start the grant cycle for the rural grants for 2025, we would like to have been working on actionable items in this plan for long enough to have cultivated and identified projects and how people come forward and present projects so that we can be effective as a board. And when I think about how our county government is structured, it almost fits really neatly into those three pathways for success.
Yeah.
So the first one with the address the fundamentals, we know we have an affordable housing issue. We know that the health and welfare and well-being of our citizens is really important because that's the basis of our economy. That kind of feels like it lives and breathes exclusively almost with the economic development department, with input from us as citizens, much less as a board, but like, hey, here's how we feel about affordable housing and what we might suggest or recommend or whatever. And then pathway 3, engineer tourism to support community happiness and quality of place. Engineering tourism sort of feels like it was with that TCAB board primarily and the recommendations that they make around these are the ways that we would enhance and grow. And it kind of feels like that pathway to grow tourism adjacent business and support entrepreneurship. That kind of feels like it naturally lives and breathes with the Economic Advisory Board. And I'm not talking about for decision-making or ownership, I'm just sort of talking about a broad category. And it kind of seems like that pathway 2 is the space where we would like to have some really actionable, like what are the things that we're really looking for? What are the things that we can really recommend as part of that economic plan? And so I feel like structurally, that's why I like starting with Trails for Tomorrow, is it's kind of like the way that they've laid it out seems to work really well. And the other thing that I would add to what Ashley said earlier that I think is really important for me to bring out, and I want everyone else's input, because sometimes, you see things and people are like, yeah, no, it's not really like that. So I'm looking for more pushback and feedback on this one. But when Ashley said, when you hire independent consultants to come in and do this work, it's very expensive work. It's very exhaustive work. It's sort of like really expensive branding exercises that you do for your company. They get it almost right. Because unless you're living and breathing within that organization or within that community, you're the one that knows those subtle things and why it's almost right. So you're like, this is fantastic, except that here's what you don't know and what you're not going to discover being outside our community.
And here's what your boilerplate missed.
Yeah, exactly. And what it missed for me that I think is really apropos to this board and what our county commission would really benefit from emphasis is that what the plan lays out is that Moab and Grand County lay outside of even the most extreme norms in terms of us deriving our support from tourism. And where I feel like they even got that wrong is that they said, you guys are not only tourism dependent and tourism heavily reliant, and you are more so than those that live outside of that normative kind of where we like to see people on the scale. I believe that they missed the mark on that a bit because of subtleties that we know, and we are even further dependent on tourism. And the reason why I would say that is they did two categories. They said, here's tourism related, and then here's tourism adjacent. And I would almost say there's a third, and that's tourism funded, meaning towns of 5,000-ish people don't have amazing recreation centers that are
Or
employing
hospitals.
people. They don't have fantastic hospitals that are employing a bunch of folks. They don't have beautiful county libraries that are employing folks. So we are not only tourism dependent and tourism adjacent dependent, I would say that our economic viability, vitality, health is almost completely reliant upon, because even our services that employ people, like if you look at the employees that are working at our city market, you don't get that in towns of 5,000-ish people.
Right.
And you don't have hospitals or EMS folks that are employed by towns of 5,000-ish people and 9,000-ish county residents. And so I feel like the work that we do here, if we could do it within that context, for me, that's when you start coming up with those threads to pull on in terms of economic diversity, because what you say is, we are almost all this. We would like to be independent of this while we nurture this, because we are almost all dependent on this. What are those unique, really interesting strategic things that we can do to aid in that transition?
Okay, I think this is a really productive discussion, but
Maybe not,
so,
that's why
no,
I want
think it is.
feedback.
I think it is. I think this idea that things are tourism funded, like the hospital, like EMS, like services that locals benefit from, that would not be in a typical town of 5,000 people in the middle of the desert. Now, the other, there is this idea, and every consultant has their bias, that is, here's a norm and here's how far you are from the norm, and you should try to get closer to the norm. Wrong. I think that's fundamentally wrong. I think that what you have to do is lean into what you have and optimize it, which is different than trying to pull back to some norm that is not possible for us because we are so tourism dependent.
So getting more specific with that, Ashley, that's exactly the fine point that I'm trying to put on the pen, which is what I think is missing from their plan is to say, this is really what we have.
Right.
And how do we then look at that as the opportunity to grow many other things? Like, we can be so many things if we look at this and we say, not only is this our opportunity, it is pretty much our basket wherein almost all of the eggs lie.
Right.
And then what can we create with that amazing basket with some really actionable things that create more opportunity?
Yeah, great.
Exactly. I think that's great. It's almost like there are existing assets that are tourism funded that aren't, that we need to enunciate more and talk
Yes,
about how
I think it's
they-
missing.
Yeah,
from
it's
the
totally
plan.
missing from it. And because then you have your tourism dependent and tourism
Yes.
adjacent. Okay,
Yes.
so when you go back to starting with
So
the
could I just,
fundamentals.
Okay,
Yeah.
please.
I always need to summarize things for my understanding. So what you're saying is there's three categories. You're talking the tourist funded is the stuff that isn't directly tourist
Yes.
related, but all towns have, but ours is a little bit different.
Ours is outsized.
As ours is outsized for the size of our family.
The hospital is the best example, and there's
Yeah.
lots of others.
And then,
Tourism funded,
funded is what you know, what
Sorry, that's all right.
So to me, it's tourism adjacent and
Yeah.
tourism funded.
Yeah, so sorry, tourism funded is the new category. Tourism is already in the report and tourism adjacent is in the report.
Yeah, so for
I mean,
me.
another way of saying it though is just that the fundamentals are tourism funded.
All of
Right,
them.
or most of them.
And
are
enhanced by.
tourism-funded and enhanced by. So, or that we, I mean, I don't know that we can add a new category, but I also think we're talking. Well, I mean, I guess
I
to
don't
me,
know that
when we're
we-
talking about, if we're talking about things like housing and healthcare and quality of education, those naturally are the fundamentals of an economy.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm not sure that I see, I understand the importance of letting people know how we got these things. But I mean, I think the key question is how to develop those things and nurture those things so that they start
Oh,
working.
I see what you're saying, but that's not what I'm saying. So I'm so glad that you said that as a clarifier. What I'm saying is that the only reason why I bring up tourism funded is because it doesn't need to be a focus, it doesn't need to be whatever, we don't need to build on it, whatever. What I'm saying is I think that there needs to be an awareness and a cognizance that we are, I believe, a lot more tourism dependent than this report would indicate.
Right. And
Does
it's
that make
because
sense?
of their bias.
I don't think we need to do
Towards-
anything about it. I'm just saying we need to, I do
No, I
believe
think
it's
adding that in
important we know.
somewhere in the general plan or in the like framing makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, it is like, it's fundamental to understanding how the Moab economy works. I guess I'm just suggesting personally, my opinion would be if we don't change the structure of those three main
Correct.
categories
I
to
agree.
be tourism funded rather than fundamentals.
To me, when I talk about tourism funded, it's more as an
I
informational
mean, housing
piece.
is the most
Okay.
important thing there,
Okay.
right? That's like, we know that's a roadblock to our economic development. Is that tourism funded? I wouldn't really think of
No.
it that way. Obviously, it is to a certain extent,
No.
but like, it's a fundamental. And we
What
need to
I'm
nurture the
saying is,
fundamentals.
when I
Let's do this, let's go, how about this, if we add a I think the fundamentals in the report are missing some things.
Sure, and we can have.
And so instead of and one way that we can cover this point that you just made, about these things that are funded, and that are outsized because of it. Like a normal, pick a 5,000 person rural town anywhere in the West, and they don't have the kind of surgeons we have coming to our hospital.
Totally.
So that's the point. And so so maybe what we do is go back to on the fundamentals, under the fundamentals where they discuss housing, and it's on page like 18 or 19 or something.
19, the 3 pathways.
Yeah, the 3 pathways. So, okay, so if we're not gonna create a new category, which sounds fine, under these fundamentals, I think there's some major things missing.
Cool.
And one of them is this acknowledgement that our tourism economy has allowed us to grow. It has created these major benefits to locals, like the hospital. And maybe we come up with some other examples of outsized in search and rescue, which occasionally does rescue locals, just saying.
The rec
So-
center.
The rec center,
Schools.
and
Schools are more of a category of, I don't know,
no, that's cool.
need than
Yeah, but
access
that's
to
3
housing.
relatively new
Schools,
Schools.
yeah,
in the town of
Those are
Hudson.
tourism funded.
That's the tourism.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
tourism
Property
funded.
taxes.
And where that
Yeah,
belongs for me.
outside of like the Grant County School District or the basic.
Yes,
Right.
and selfishly, I agree with everything that you're saying, 100% I agree. I just wanna make sure that where I intended to inject that point goes to where I intended to inject it, which is kind of in the more boring parts where they say Moab derives 57% of its economic and its employment from tourism. What I'm saying is it's that area of the plan that I'm inserting what I'm saying. Is I'm saying, oh no, I think it's almost every employee of a hospital. I'm saying it's our healthcare workers.
yes.
And I'm saying it's our library workers.
Yes.
I'm saying it's our, so mine, right now I'm speaking to more of like the boring parts of the plan. And I'm just saying, I think that we should all just have a fundamental awareness of we actually are not only an outlier of where we get our employment and our taxable revenue. I believe we're even a further outlier because I believe what we're counting as non-tourism jobs, actually think that they're tourism funded jobs.
Exactly.
But I think what I would do here is put side by side under fundamentals the way in which tourism and it's the funding associated with it gives us scale and funding to improve certain things,
Mhm.
right next to a statement and acknowledgement of the way that it creates pressure on things.
Yes,
So like
Yes.
our housing market
Yes.
is pressured and made more difficult due to
correct.
all the second homeowners, all the vacation
Correct.
rentals, all that kind of stuff. That's a challenge we face, right?
Yes.
It's one of the reasons why we have a
100%.
workforce
But
housing
there-
shortage.
And that beautiful
And we should
library that
understand
I
that right
love.
alongside the way that it helps have
There
us have
too.
a better hospital and improve our quality of
Yes.
life.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, we're really close, but I think, there are straight up spin-off benefits. Like the hospital, that is a straight up benefit. Yes, tourism demand from tourists, all those broken collarbones led to, demand from tourism led to the building of the hospital.
Yeah.
And so that is almost a straight up benefit.
Sure.
Right? Okay, now, but demand from tourism that affected housing is not has caused more of a shortage.
And I think we should just lay those two
Yeah,
things
I
out
think we
side by
should
side
too.
Yes.
and not mince words about it.
Okay.
It
Yes.
gives us big benefits and it
Okay.
gives us
I like
serious challenges.
Chris, what you said, the side by side, I think is perfect structurally because I feel like, and that's why I said, like, this is our wonderful opportunity. I think we all agree, like, hey, this is our really crappy challenge. And also, this is our really beautiful opportunity side by side, like you said.
Okay,
When I think what we're, I'm doing more the historical thing. I think
Yeah.
what we want to do, what Trails to Tomorrow, what the vision of Chris Baird and people was that we want to make our economy strong enough and diverse enough, maybe not diverse from tourism because it's all related, but that it stays strong, that it continues to thrive and provide benefits to us all. Because, this community's already experienced being totally reliant on the uranium. Not totally, we had a little bit of tourism, a little bit. We had about 3 motels. A few restaurants, none of them very good. But and then that crashed and everything crashed. We had to close down a school, we had to go to a 4-day school. We had one doctor for a while. So there is a fundamental that if we don't maintain a strong tourism economy, everything crumbles.
Do you know, Mary, I'm listening to you talk, and Chris, I'm asking you to put on your public policy hat for just a minute, because bring your expertise to the table. As I'm listening to you talk, I feel like one of the biggest debates or challenges in the community is when you start talking about tourism and over-tourism or regenerative tourism or reliance on tourism. When what I really think our asset may be, our economy and all of those other benefits, is our public lands. And the reason why I say that is, that's the reason why people came to live here that started businesses to begin with, right? So they may have started as a tourist, but it's not why they wanted to live in the community. They wanted to live in the community because of the benefit of the public lands. That's really the asset and the resource that we're talking about. So tourism can ebb and flow, but part of what we saw happen in 2021 as a result of COVID, for people who wanted to go and enjoy the wide outdoor spaces of public lands because they were quarantining and confined to home. Do you know what it feels like a little less controversial? When we say tourism, we imagine the bus fulls of people who are coming and descending upon the tail to spend money or not spend money that we're relying on just like uranium. But really, why are they here? They're here because of this beautiful offering that we have, right? It's the reason why we as citizens benefit.
I think as Dave probably can help with this too, but I think one thing we're missing, or what happens in the translation, is I think it's our human nature, or some people's human nature more than not, that they look at what's going wrong.
Mhm.
They focus on what's wrong. And I think somehow we have not expressed or promoted what it has given us, the
It's education.
positive, you know, that, so,
Communication strategy.
you know, that
Okay.
we're, okay, so, but we're getting off the, so I think we're.
Well,
Right.
hang on. That, what you just said, Mary, is exactly what you were saying earlier, that we need to acknowledge the benefits that our extreme tourism dependence has given us. An incredible hospital.
Benefits, maybe that's-
There are these benefits that are not just directly tourism related and they're not tourism adjacent, but they are part of the, you know, and I think it should be in the fundamentals, the way we've been talking about it. Like, here's what's incredibly great. We have this great hospital. Here's what tourism did that's hard. They hurt us in housing. But can we go back to public lands for a second? So right now, the state of Utah is actively seeking to get in front of the Supreme Court a bill that will give all BLMs and BLM lands in Utah to the state.
And the chances of
The
that
state-
happening is pretty good.
The state, well, most people feel like the law is fairly settled, but after the election and who knows what's gonna happen, this has become a lot bigger risk. So let's just spend 1 minute on that. If the BLM becomes owned by the state of Utah, what you're doing is all the payroll from the federal government goes away. So every person who works for the BLM in Moab, the state is supposed to be making that payroll in. That's one thing. The state has no budget for this. In their own webpage about this takeover, under the budget section, they say, if the case goes forward, we'll work harder on the budget. And they also mention that that right now we give $250 million a year to the federal government based on the oil and gas royalties that we pay, that portion that is owed to the federal government. Even if the land ownership changes, it doesn't change those valid and existing contracts. So it's not like we get to keep the $250 million even if we own the land. It's still a lease that the federal government has a legal right to those royalties. There's a huge report that several professors from USU and other places did about, 8 years ago, that talks about how the only way that the state can afford to maintain the BLM lands in Utah will be if the price of oil and gas is above $100 a barrel, and if those royalties I just mentioned were renegotiated, which there's no incentive for the people of America to give up their right to that.
Right.
Maybe they would, but basically then what you're doing is you're talking about a public land system that is funded by oil and gas revenue. I think that's a good idea, in perpetuity to fund by oil and gas revenue. So this is a major threat to the Moab economy. Like, it can't be overstated. The majority of our recreation, and I don't know if it's in here, maybe it is, but a certain part of it is park and a huge part is BLM. And the people who live here and the professionals we've attracted and the businesses we've attracted mostly recreate on the BLM. A lot of locals don't depend on the parks, right?
No.
So it would be a fundamental change. So all I'm pointing out is that it's woefully underrepresented under these fundamentals. Like, it's an assumption that the public lands are always going to be there. And so we really need to point out, to add to this list of fundamentals, support the public land system. Which means all Americans pay. Public lands are about 1% of the federal budget. All Americans pay for the land that runs the Moab economy. And if we don't acknowledge that in this report, we're like dancing around on top of the onion and not getting into the depths of it, right? We're just like saying, oh. So I just think that in addition to this really important category of that we were talking about, tourism funded benefits that we have, and maybe there's another working title is tourism funded, but maybe we think of another way to talk about it so that we can set it up like you were mentioning, Chris. Here are the good things that have happened, but the outsized benefits we have because we're so tourism dependent, but here are also the challenges. So there's that category, but then there is, under the fundamentals, we have to mention our public lands and not just the parks, that the BLM is a major component. because it comes, what you guys were both saying is the reason people are here is because of those public lands. And a lot of consultants assume it's settled, and it is not settled.
So maybe add a risks section. So add public lands as a benefit, right? As one of those assets.
As the driving fundamental piece.
And then
Like,
So what, I wanna,
yeah, and risks.
I would like to
like affordable housing.
get some,
Bigger,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have an affordable housing
become
problem.
more focused. I think we're whirling. So what are the categories we're looking at?
So, I mean, where I think that we ought to offer suggestions would be for the overview section, which is very short in the initial, in the general plan currently, but I think it should be made a little bit more robust. And if things that we're bringing up are so fundamental, then they should be mentioned in the first 3 paragraphs, right? So if public lands is so fundamental, then it deserves a mention there. So that's like one category where we could say, these are the things that are so key that they need to be mentioned in the first half of the page, right?
Yes.
So we need
And
to
then
add
underneath-
fundamental.
Yeah, or, well, no, the fundamentals, because that word is used for one of the categories, let's not use it for the overview.
Are
So
you looking at the key
overview.
findings, Chris?
So in the general plan,
Oh, you're looking at the general plan.
yeah, if we're
Okay.
doing a rewrite of the general plan,
Got it,
that's what I'm
okay.
saying. Yeah, so we'll have an overview section at the top of the general plan. And I think we can make it a little more robust and we can offer some suggestions to what goes in there, right? Underneath that, then I think we have our categories, right, that come from the Trail of Tomorrow. A healthy tourism economy, address the fundamentals, and grow tourism adjacent businesses
Can
that
we
support
use this
entrepreneurship.
whiteboard, what do y'all think?
Sure.
Ben, we're gonna erase the whiteboard.
Is that okay?
Can we do that?
Enoch.
Yeah, let me come in and take a photo of it, and then, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
I mean, don't you think we need to?
That's a good way to do it. We either need that there.
Because otherwise I feel like we're spinning out.
Yeah.
And I get nervous when we spin out.
We good? Thank you.
Just me. One of these goal people that always tries to.
No, thank you, man.
And then, yeah, so I think those 3 categories, we may want an additional
So when you talk
category.
about the 3 categories, are we talking about the 3 pathways to success?
Mhm.
So starting there in the general plan.
Yeah, I think overview,
Uh-huh.
an outline of it, my proposed outline of the revised general plan would be overview, and then those 3
3
categories, the
pathways.
3 pathways. And that would, I mean, to me, underneath each of those, that would be the bulk of the general plan, would fall, all these things we're talking
What are
about,
the 3?
Page 19.
Agreed. So you're
and then maybe in the
talking about
implementation one.
re-engineering the general plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about,
Page 19.
suggested edits to the general plan that will incorporate, that will incorporate, That will, connect it to the Trails to Tomorrow plan.
Yep.
Okay, so overview in 3 categories. What are the 3 categories?
Healthy tourism economy.
Okay,
Second one is tourism adjacent businesses and support entrepreneurship.
wow, those are, okay.
Yeah, I think it works, but it is a little clunky. And then fundamentals.
So there's 4 categories?
Engineering,
No, they just, those 2 are
Adjacent.
tourism adjacent and entrepreneurship are in one category together. Is the way that the Trail of Tomorrow is organized.
And I would almost
I
call
think
that
it's
third
okay,
category
but I don't
tourism.
know.
Because I kind of feel like they've got fundamentals, tourism, and tourism adjacent.
Okay,
Wait, tourism is the first one.
Oh, healthy tourism. Sorry, yeah,
okay, so,
And
Our-
the third one is fundamentals.
okay, so, healthy tourism, tourism business. Viewership. Okay, now, I just, because we're suggesting edits to the general plan, and part of what we're trying to do is edit this report to fit into the general plan, I think I think suggesting changes to these might be okay, to the titles, but.
Yeah, to the titles and stuff like that, I would say yes. I mean, and I don't think we should not make any changes, but I would suggest that we offer a light touch
Okay,
to,
agreed.
because this is a process that was driven by community input and things like that. I mean, if we just
Yeah.
redo it ourselves, it's like a group of 5 people just decided to like override like this year-long process. We don't want to look that way. That's
And the
all.
categories
So-
are great.
So we should
Yeah,
improve
could I-
it, but with a light touch would be
Okay, I think-
my advice there.
Okay, I think that's
If
fine.
I could just
So-
offer a comment on that. Yeah, if I could just say, I also think that, I think there's a lot we can do to modify and change and say what we agree and don't disagree with, but I'd love to see the documents delivered to us remain the way they are delivered to us, just because even if we disagree with things, the value of a third party conducting a plan like this is that a third party conducts it. You know, if we start changing the plan, it kind of runs the risk of, well, why didn't we just do it ourselves in the first place? So I think that there's a lot of room in this general plan section, and in crafting the sort of action progress plan for the strategic plan itself, to say, well, these are the parts we agree with and don't disagree with and would have changed. But I personally would love to see just those documents as they are delivered remain intact, just because they were part of a public process conducted by a third party, and there is some value to that, looking at it from the staff side.
Well, and I really agree with what you said in the little outline, Ben, at the beginning, which is that these should be included as annexes to the general plan, right? I mean, to me, that's a great way of ensuring that they
Yeah,
come through. I mean,
sure.
they stand connected to this on their own, and
Yeah.
and the general plan is the area where we get to make it, I mean, really make it something that can be implemented and improved upon.
Yeah, I wasn't throwing it out.
Yeah.
I was leaning a little more on the general plan part of this instead, but, okay, so, so under these fundamentals, one thing that or I don't know if we have agreement on this yet or not, but, one thing that they do not even mention that we think needs to be added is this dependence on public land. Or is that?
Sure. I mean, I could-
Our
I
dependency
think
on
that
tourism
belongs
is-
more in risks.
Well, our fundamental is our dependency on tourism is based on our dependency of public lands, and they go hand in hand.
Well, and that's why I was kind of pushing for it to be in the overview.
I agree.
But,
Yeah.
so it's like, without the public lands, which there is an actual threat to those going away. And, millions of consultants work all over the country, and they do the marketing and the strategic planning and all this stuff, and they all start with the assumption that the land is there. That the land is not going away. And that is a bad assumption. And these guys did the same thing. So I think the one major edit that we have to this document, is if we're gonna work to include it, it's our opportunity to point out that we are 100% dependent on public lands remaining public.
So put public lands in the overview, just as a bullet point. We want to make sure that that point is made right up top, right? And then also under healthy tourism.
Well,
The
it
only way
sort
to
of
keep,
transcends all of these things.
sure, but like the key part of the way it drives our economy is, the main part of our economy is tied directly to it. So let's
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna
let's not
call-
lose that. Like
Okay,
that's,
access to public lands. How about
sure,
that?
exactly. And that's where, I mean, that can mean, I mean, yes, there's risk, but like, there's also just like day-to-day planning. Like, that's how trails fits into our economy, right? Like, that's how all sorts of,
But that's the main point I've been trying to make
Right.
to the community, is that if you don't do the connection between the town and the public lands properly, that's where things go wrong.
Totally.
The visitors, that's your product that you're selling, and if you haven't, if the product is disappointing people, if they're confused, lost, and on the wrong trail, you're not delivering a good product, and that risk goes to your whole economy.
And Ashley, I think you should write a couple bullet points, like not right now on the board,
Yeah,
under healthy tourism to send to Ben,
okay,
that would help, make those key points that you've made again and again,
yeah,
right, in that section, because that's how we help. I mean, those are key parts of the way that we have and maintain a healthy tourism economy.
okay. And I guess I don't understand how they're defining fundamentals, because
Housing, workforce, air service, buildable land, noise and traffic mitigation.
Those are the things they
Types of
named.
things that they
okay,
have.
well, I'm just gonna, I would say
Yeah, we
again,
should get names out of more.
well, the access to public land is a fundamental. It doesn't matter if you have enough housing if you lose your access to public land. like, we'll have.
I don't disagree, it's just that that's not how they've defined that section. So the way
Yeah.
that they've defined the section is these are, so go back to an economic development mindset, which is
Yeah.
what this is coming from.
Right,
Fundamentals are those things that we have to have as a community to support economic development in the first place.
okay.
So I feel like that's why for me trails belong really neatly, although you're right, they trickle down into every category. They belong in the overview because of the level of their importance, and then they also belong in healthy tourism because that's what we're selling as a product.
So why don't we?
Is that,
I would agree.
Guys?
I think just because you don't need to duplicate
Yeah, okay.
something, and so you
Okay,
just
I'm
pick the
with you.
category they fall under
I'm with
best,
you.
and you
So-
just admit their
We can
trends.
talk about it in the overview, and we can talk about how it drives our economy here. And then these are fundamentals, when they say fundamentals, they mean of a normal economy.
of any,
Yeah.
these are the basics you
Economic-
gotta have to have an economy.
Fundamentals, yeah, okay, so you have
Childcare, that's right, that's
Perfect.
what
Is it,
Great.
okay,
childcare,
Yes.
access to
Healthcare and education.
healthcare, education.
okay, but these are all already in the report, right?
Yeah.
Like not
Not
so
no.
much. I mean,
Okay.
like healthcare isn't covered very well in the report, but anyway, I mean, I think we're just
Healthcare,
highlighting
education.
its importance.
Yeah.
Okay, and so this is, I'm gonna put like a little T, this is really improved by healthcare. I mean, by tourism, right? But, so this is a plus T, this is a minus T. This is a minus T. And I'd say this is a plus, but whatever. Those are kind of, you were talking about that chart,
Totally.
That
Yeah,
says-
but it's like,
or,
whatever it is,
I
yeah.
mean,
Go ahead, Mary, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of fundamentals. How deep are we gonna go into it? I mean, our infrastructure, maybe just put it
Keep going,
infrastructure.
yeah, that's huge.
Like water, sewer,
Mhm.
electricity, access to internet. They did mention
Totally.
that.
Yeah.
But I think we could just put it as infrastructure and maybe, for example, say.
And then, yeah, that'll be a paragraph that should mention all of those things, right? That's key.
and that's kind of a minus T, like the more tourism you have, the more, unless you structure your economy in a way that tourists are paying for the infrastructure, the burden goes to the locals.
Yeah, and well, so many of them are like, they get a plus and a minus, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's how I would think about, and I don't know that, I mean, that's not to me the fundamental like thing we're trying to say here is whether this is good or bad, that tourism is good or bad for this. Like the fundamental thing is like, what do we need to do under each of these categories
Okay,
to make sure that we have a healthy economy?
and so,
But we should acknowledge.
on
that-
the, we don't have to do too much on healthcare because that seems to be funding itself and working, we're attracting doctors, we're doing a good
It's
job
just
on that.
awareness,
Yeah, and,
so we look at it.
yeah, so it's the ones that are not, the fundamentals that are not being addressed by policy
Yeah,
that we need to worry about.
and connectivity is another one.
Yeah.
There, that's the air service, but also.
Jasmine?
So we're getting way in the weeds. When we're talking general plan and when we're talking about this strategic plan, I think we need to keep in mind that we're also talking about a 5-year plan, right? So the general plan is updated every 5 years, and this specific strategic plan was with the
5 years time is
with the
fast.
5-year thing in mind. So,
Yeah.
you know, we're focusing on the things that so that's why the fundamental section was relatively small, because those are the things that stuck out right away, right? Like if we don't address housing right now in the next 5 years, that's going to impact our economic development into the future, past that 5 years, obviously.
Yeah.
We get too many things on that short list.
Right. I agree, and I feel like, and Ben, here's looking at you, Ben. It feels like that third thing, all of the conditions necessary to be able to support, sustain, grow a prosperous, healthy economy, that literally lives right within the Economic Development Department. That is what that department wakes up every single day and lives and breathes to do outside of the purview of this group, right?
Except like education, we have a separate entity that
Yes,
runs education.
It's not us, is what
WISA,
I'm
we have
saying.
water and sewer, like, that's like,
Right.
actually, a lot of fundamentals are the areas outside of the economic development.
It's not
It's
us.
the rest of the county
Yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah.
like, making sure that things
Sure.
are working, but I think like, to Jasmine's point, like when something rises up in the priority list to become a key roadblock to economic development and
Yes.
prosperity in the
That's
county,
housing.
that's when it needs to get like highlighted in a report like this or in the general plan on economic issues.
Well,
Because then you bring like a whole of government approach to the issue and you say, just because you're not the like planning and zoning people, like you should still be involved in this because this is one of the top priority issues for our entire community. And so economic development, when you guys are looking at rural county grants, right? Like housing should be a priority, even though it's not a traditional economic development issue because it's like number one community like issue.
limitation. I think that's a really important point that came out of that little conversation is the purpose of this document is to sort of de-silo and to get everyone, it's not about, okay, you're just in charge of this and you're just in charge of this and economic development just does this. It's like if you don't understand the context in which your project is related, it's hard to do a good job. And so you could say, right, the argument for having a big list is that we need everyone to see the context for all these different things that they're working on because we're talking about connecting to the general plan here. And so the general plan it's not about what is in the jurisdiction of the economic development department versus some other department. I mean, infrastructure is not in really but I think economic development can't succeed unless the other departments do a good job too, unless they're succeeding.
Yes.
So that would be the argument for why we really need to, in the general plan, list these things.
So just to circle back, the reason why I agree with you and I think that this conversation, as broad as it is so important, is going back to the purpose and zooming back in. Chris, what brought it up initially was that you had said the idea of working groups and sub-working groups to be able to tackle specific issues when we first brought up this conversation. So I feel like this is what's going to be instructive in that process to be able to say, and what would be helpful to even have cross-functional teams and cross-functional working groups where you're bringing in people from the TCAP board or from sanitation or from, do you see what I'm saying?
The one thing that I really, and we've tried hard, but I think what's missing in this small group and what has been missing is we don't have any city representation. And I don't know how to work to get it because we have tried.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's beside the point because I look at who's here.
I have thoughts about that, but we can talk about that
later.
For me, number two.
If I could just add a comment just real quick.
Yeah.
Dave wanted to pass on some comments from me before he left because he had to go attend. And one of the things he said was that he was also concerned about the lack of city presence at the table for this process.
So lack of what, I'm sorry?
The city leadership.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't know what to do.
I believe that's a comment that Mary just said. Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is. And we have
Maybe it's time to,
push again
another
because
effort, but
I have thoughts about that. So maybe we can circle back when we start talking about cross-functional teams. But the way that, and I'm curious about, again, I'm looking for poking holes and pushback. The way that I would summarize number two is instead of like an exhaustive list, I almost think that number two can be summarized by any entrepreneurial endeavor, any business endeavor, any organizational endeavor that can benefit from the 3 million additional consumers that come into this town. Meaning, when I think of tourism adjacent, I think of it the same way as what we were talking about, the benefits and the challenges that we experience from tourism. It's every single business owner organization that can benefit because those folks are coming in that otherwise wouldn't be able to. You're not gonna have a wedding planning industry in Moab if you don't have because you don't have a wedding planning industry supported by 5,000-ish and 9,000-ish residents. You don't have catering businesses. You don't have opportunities to sell consumer products or goods or to produce consumers products and goods. So it's almost like that's your advantage of getting 3 million captive new consumers every single year. Do you guys agree with
That's
that
an
being tourism
amazing way to
adjacent or-
describe it. I think that's a really important distinction because we've never really framed it like that. And I think that's super important. We have 6,000 people who live here. We have 3 million customers for somebody.
New ones, by the way.
New customers.
They change
every
out
year.
every single year.
Businesses, forms.
You know, I mean, to me, this is the area where there's been the least amount of focus historically
Yes.
and the most amount of additional opportunity. Like, I think we know about number 1 and number 3, and there's a lot we need to like update and add to how to do a better job in each of those categories. But to me, number 2 is where there's like a pretty wide open space where there's a huge amount of opportunity. I
My
mean, I think
passion
Is
sits
that
there.
where-
That's what gets me up in the morning,
I
and
mean,
it
it's
is
my-
hampered by housing and workforce.
that's my business, you know, is like, I
Yes.
mean, we as a
Supporting
coffee
craves,
producer, right? Like,
yeah,
if I can get the tourist who tastes my coffee while they're here to buy it online on a regular basis throughout the rest of the year, then I'm taking advantage of the opportunity that Moab presents me as a company.
Correct.
Right?
and my
And there are lots
passion
of
is
other
that
industries that can
gateway.
do something similar like that. I mean, I think that,
Yes.
the wedding industry is a great example. Farms and food producers, like creating an agritourism industry
We
here
could
is
have
a
our
great
own
opportunity.
food system.
Artists and artisans
region.
is like a huge area as well. So I think there's a lot of,
Yes, yes.
Agriculture really struggles here.
See, and I
yeah,
think,
but there's an
Mary,
opportunity,
that
right?
if
I mean,
we-
that's where like,
And I
Yes.
know in a 5-year plan, if that's a good one to focus on, but yeah, because
I don't think it's necessarily, I agree with you 100%, it's a focus. What excites me about it is because of those 3 million evergreen refreshed visitors, we do have an opportunity to create our own regional food system here. And we would want to do it, would have to have leadership and ownership. But if we wanted to, those 3 million people make it possible, because that's enough to support agriculture if you had an infrastructure in
I mean,
place.
if you
We
visited
don't.
like Napa Valley or Tuscany or any,
Right,
they're
it's
like
not like the locals are
agritourism
drinking
industries
all that
No.
wine.
No,
huge.
and they're clusters.
Like people
Here's-
go to these places because they want to experience the amazing like
Yes.
food and like product of that land in this amazing space. Like
and I know
a visit
to a
Easy
farm
Bee Farms and
is trying to tap into some of that.
and so is Spanish,
Valley Winery.
those two is the
Are
ones.
great
Yes.
examples, exactly.
You
And
know,
I don't want to lose what Chris is saying because I think it's vitally important. If we could keep Napa in mind, here's how I think that example benefits us. Where all of the federal dollars, the EDA dollars, where all of the support, all of the funding is in clusters, right? And what Napa is exactly what potentially Moab could be. It is a wine cluster. And what happens within that cluster? You have whole marketing and PR firms around wine. You have producers around that. You have a whole tourism industry around it. You have an entire wine and food
See,
and beverage
I'm,
industry.
I'm gonna push back.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
This is a 5-year plan. That is so.
no, it's just
beyond-
awareness. I'm not saying we do anything
Okay, so
about
I
it.
think.
No, I'm saying
I
opportunity.
think for the
Yes,
5-year
I agree
plan,
with you.
we should focus on something that is more, attainable quicker. And
I'll
I'm
agree with
looking at-
you.
And I'm looking at things like our wedding industry, our, pushing, my art issue,
Yeah, art, I think art and artisans is a key one there.
See, I think right now, what we have in this community, if you start looking at it for attracting people to come here for health, is not just our hospitals, but I mean, we probably have an above average number of people that do massage, that do Reiki, that do, body work, who do, there's, therapy, different, I just think, there's a lot of things in that area that we can focus on that can have more of an immediate, effect, a positive effect on our community.
But I
And I
don't think there's a town thing here. I think it's a way of thinking of
Yes,
that is different. And
yes.
so Mary, don't be worried that we're like, we're gonna go from zero.
I'm not
to
saying let's
Napa
create a
Valley
plan.
Next week.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think that's what, we're saying. I think I don't think
Someday,
that enough people understand that 3 million people come through here every year to spend money. And we've been talking about it in all kinds of different ways, like this tourism blob, this can't turn left on Main Street, which, by the way, why can't we get left turn signals? Let's not go there, but anyway. And so, I think that framing it this way is really gonna help people see the 3 million people are coming every year. Now, how do we want them to behave? What do we want them to do? And how can we do it in a way that maximizes local benefit, their visit, from everything from all the different industries they can support to how do we manage them physically so that they're not in our way?
And we'll leave that to the entrepreneurs,
Also,
meaning,
Right.
the cluster is not just agriculture businesses, the cluster is food
Well,
businesses. That's our
that's-
second largest industry besides hotels. Employment is in food and beverage,
Yes,
right? So this is
and-
also food and beverage, and it's about
We're
it's about
supporting,
improving all of that.
essentially supporting more of a wedding industry. I mean, I think the agriculture industry plays right into that as well.
yes, ma'am,
Okay.
yes, ma'am. And how I think that all of that rolls into number one, and this would be my third point working in reverse, is the way that number two drives number one to me is that then determines and drives who are we attracting and what do we want them to do here? And that's what we define as what is healthy tourism economy. Meaning, like, if we know this is what we're building, so these are the fundamentals, this is our base, our foundation that we're building upon. And here's a big bubble of opportunity to be able to leverage those 3 million folks. Then who are the folks that we're looking for? What are those folks looking to do? How do we define those folks? And then it will be easier for us to find them and to develop the tactics and okay, great, if we know that they look like this and this is what their profile is, then where will our marketing department with EDD go to find them? Does that make sense?
Yes. So there's this category,
The one
of
they,
these
the one
things,
they
and
mentioned.
then there's these related professionals that build on this category. So now you need web marketing.
Marketing folks,
Yeah.
accounting folks,
Marketing.
finance folks.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Another.
That's a cluster. Now we have a
Yeah,
cluster.
these are related, a
That's based
cluster
on
of
tourism.
cluster of related professionals.
And industry clusters
Yeah,
is the fundamental for economic development.
right. So if we see our tourism as an industry that automatically has 3 million customers, like, hello, they're coming. So you have 3 million customers, and here are all the businesses, and then here are all the support people that they are gonna
Yes.
need.
And who, now to me, that drives number one, which is who do we want to be our customer? Who's our target audience? Who's our target customer?
There was
Well,
one-
that goes back to that, I mean.
There was one more
preaching.
thing.
Number one.
No, and this over here with the
Okay.
health art, that they mentioned, I was, and I don't know what the term is, they mentioned having people come for week-long seminars. Like they said with,
Well, let's call those conventions, I think.
or some, they were more seminars,
Yeah.
teaching.
We throw one more out there too, Mary, I think I heard you mention this
Hmm.
in a commission meeting on dark skies.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna put that under
Cause that would,
outdoor experiences.
That's probably deserves to go under the first section, don't you guys think?
But no, but we're
It's a little
selling,
different.
I have a business that sells outdoor experiences, just like somebody has a business that sells food. Like,
Yeah,
Yes.
but that's the core business, not
Right,
these
right,
like
right.
peripheral things
got
that
you,
we're
got
building
you,
out.
got you. Okay,
right?
got you. Access to public lands, outdoor experience.
Yeah, I mean, we should spend some time on section 1
Yeah.
at some point here.
Yeah.
Build that out. Would probably be helpful, kind of the most important thing in our local economy, but.
I'm gonna get a hold, I'm sorry.
And this is a massive list, dark sky, jeeping, biking, blah, 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 all these different things that you can do. Okay, I'm feeling better. Is anyone else?
I'm starting to feel like we're doing something. I don't know if it's my teacher
And then-
in me, I always have to have a goal and an objective and to
Before we end,
be comfortable.
I mean, I think we're building out something, and then what I would say is we need to ask, like, what does this need to be able to be implemented? Right, like, what does that look like? I mean, maybe prioritization of certain types of things? Or, you know, who are the players that need to be pulled together to implement? I don't like, for it to
Here's
turn
the
from like
implementation. We absolutely
outlet
have to
plan.
support our federal public lands.
Yeah.
And that's something that our county
Oh,
needs to support.
yeah.
And if that ends up being controversial, I don't even know where to go, right? And so
We're gonna,
I'm sure it will be, because the idea is that the state could do a better job managing the public lands, but the question is with what money? And they don't, and so, but anyway, okay, so implementation is,
May I devil's advocate on that just a little bit,
sure,
on what?
what you just said
yeah, I'd love to hear it.
about public lands and budget and the state and the county. And I'm gonna say this really delicately because I sit squarely in the middle of all of it. And when I say that, I am balanced in my perspective. I would say probably that's the thing that drives me the most crazy is how balanced I am. I feel like if we had our strong economic plan related to what amounts to our business plan for our county, our conversations about public lands and budget from a business perspective with the state would probably be more productive and more collaborative.
You know what?
Framing it in this way, I believe.
Let's have an
Adds to
offline
productivity.
conversation about that.
Okay.
Because there's long time fundamental beliefs that the federal state is bad for the economy of Utah. And those beliefs are what drive most of our elected officials.
But it's my cognizance of that gets excited when we start framing like this.
Well, right, I mean, connecting the dots and showing that if you don't have the federal support for public land, none of this happens. There's just people that don't want to see that.
Well, they don't understand that, well, let's not, we're gonna go
Sorry.
totally on another.
Yeah, I would love to have.
I guess all I'm saying is that that's another benefit, that awareness and that
Absolutely.
conversation is one of the largest benefits that I feel a process like this drives.
Exactly, and I mean, when you say, why did Adobe and Goldman Sachs pick Salt Lake instead of Denver?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the answer. But anyway, okay, moving on. So this is feeling pretty good. And this is the outline of what we're talking about adding to the general plan, right?
Yeah,
And
I
it
wonder,
dovetails into the, what's tomorrow or?
I wonder if we should, yeah, I mean, so pages 19 to 25 more or less are their action plan. And so they have underneath each of these categories, their list of things that we should consider. So I wonder if we should go, I don't know, like, go through them and
Yeah,
add the ones that we
great.
agree with
Yeah,
or
love
whatever.
it.
And then, once we do that, then maybe we start to prioritize, right? We kind of have like things we think might have been missing, but some of these probably are in here also.
Okay, pages what?
It starts on page 19.
Oh, I'll use that one because I had a shorter version run off.
19, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So they start with address the fundamentals.
Well, I think, are we gonna talk about each one of them?
I don't know if we need to, I'm not sure what the best way to do this is.
Well, let's just,
I mean,
there's
so like-
only 7 in here, right?
There's, 7 is under A, and then
It's under A.
there's 4 under B, and 3 under C, and.
are there any we disagree with?
I haven't read through all of them in any detail, and I'm so sorry, but I'm admitting that just so everyone in this room can see my shortcomings and
Why?
failings.
I haven't read through.
But I will do that
Much.
tonight.
Well, I think this is key. I think establishing a point person or having, I mentioned it in our budget, in our last night, that we need to put our money where our mouth is, and I'm asking in this budget.
You must be out of control, business society has to join.
$100,000 towards housing.
So Mary,
Because
a question that I would have on that too, because I agree with you, and I'm wondering also, can that person help facilitate the conversation that's happening in many states across the country that are all wrestling with affordable housing around use of public lands and freeing those up for housing?
they've done it,
and-
and I think,
No?
no, I think public, okay. St. George,
And I'm
St.
referring primarily
George
to
is
civil.
built
land.
well, you look, there is a process for us to go and work with the Bureau of Land Management to have federal land deeded over to us. We've already done it. That's our cemetery, that's OSTA. Hopefully that will be UMTRA. And a lot of the land that is private, looks private in St. George is really public lands. It's been deeded over to local control or local management with a carrot that it can only be used for this. That the cemetery can only be used for cemetery. OSTA has to be recreation and such that participates. We can go to the public land right now. We don't have to take it back. We can go to our Bureau of Land Management right now and start the process of, okay, we would like this land, we'd have to locate it and decide, we want this portion, this small portion close to Moab to be deeded over to be managed. It will still be somewhat owned by the BLM, but managed by us to build affordable housing.
So
There is a process to do that. We don't have to take the land back.
it's true, but so a few things on that. When you mention public land in general, and it's good to look at all categories, state-owned, not just federal, SITLA, all the different, if you say public land in general, are there publicly owned parcels in our county that we could look at for housing? So that's a good way to frame it,
Yeah.
okay? When you talk about negotiating with the federal agency, it is much more complicated.
Oh, I know,
And so-
but it's doable.
It's possibly
We've done
doable,
it.
but I would like to see a place, like, the big danger, first of all, okay, Mike Lee has a bill in the Congress, and they'll reintroduce it, I'm sure, in the next Congress, that says we're gonna have the BLM identify places where public land could be used for housing near gateway communities. And the problem is, at the same time, he also supports defunding the BLM. So the BLM doesn't have the funds to actually do the process, right? So I think that the thing that we could recommend to our county government is to do a public land review of all the public parcels in the county, include SITLA, everything, and say which ones are important to our economy. Now, some we're going to discover are really important to recreation economy and to outdoor access. There are SITLA parcels that if they're closed, if they were developed a certain way, it could close access to public land. Like, you have to look at the whole picture. So, and in that review, we would find possible parcels, regardless of ownership, that could help with housing.
So following up on that, and I don't want to get off on it, I do want to put a flag in it because I think it's important, is the San Juan County development that they outlined on SITLA land that I don't think they're going to be able to fund is amazing. Like, their plan, what they actually did in hiring the civil engineers, and I don't know, have you guys seen that detailed plan and how they lay it out with the streets and the school and the housing and whatever?
The problem is they don't have the water.
They don't have what they need, but I feel like if we had that for Moab similarly, just the way that they've organized it with planning for growth with schools and housing and all of those things, I think we can actually benefit from the planning process that they went through. Because it's a solid plan. They just don't have the resources
It's
to
not,
execute on it.
well, that's what makes it not as solid.
Yeah.
Is because, yeah, it's a plan, but it's a pie in the sky. They don't have the water rights.
If you ignore things like water, if you ignore things like
Right.
taking land from the American people, you have to compensate them. And those negotiations are always extremely long and painful whenever we do those trades. So, but what about just recommending the idea of a land ownership review to look at that sort of encompasses both of what you're saying, doing better planning and thinking about housing. Like, could we recommend that?
Do we have a housing role right now in the county?
Oh,
A
well,
dedicated full-time housing employee?
well,
What I'm realizing as we jump into these conversations is that we don't have
there's not a chance that we can go through each one of these
Yeah.
things. This is like, it was my own suggestion and it was a bad one. In terms of like moving this discussion forward, I mean, maybe what we ought to really do is just identify things that we think are high priorities and just say, you know, within these categories, there's a lot more in this document. And we probably, I mean, because also like if someone's gonna do the housing one, like it shouldn't just be this group around a table that tries to create a recommendation that goes to the general.
Well, that's why I was trying to go broader.
So, yeah, exactly, which makes sense to like, pick maybe some things like that, or just say like, you know, these are the like 5 things that we think are like, should be acted on, you know, within the next year or something like that, or just like high priority items.
Well, I
that
think
we would
reviewing
pull from it.
you know, looking at land ownership, we don't have to hire, I mean, it's almost an intern. Like you just look at do a review of the land ownership. Sitla parcels, first of all, like where are the Sitla parcels that we are interested in?
County development.
Yeah, it's on Sitla. So reviewing Sitla, it's almost like review possible buildable parcels. Like, so where we are right now is deep into housing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, some kind of, land, review, countywide, something like that, you know, just.
And then maybe break that down too into, we're reviewing not only the buildable parcels, but commercial parcels that can be used for other things. Commercial, where you want to review what's buildable for housing and also what's available for industry.
Sure.
Right.
Sure, and recreation, like, are there parcels where, I mean, we need more close to town trails. And we have a few private parcels that are in play a little bit.
This seems to be like a separate bullet point on land use as a fundamental.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so let's do that then. So okay.
Just
good
add
point.
it there.
So we turn on this
And just
into
throw that all under.
Yeah.
bullet point.
land use review, let's call it. Because it is a really important step that if we did it, we would, it would help us learn a lot. Okay, now I've got my own confusing.
And then back to the context of what water rights and resources are available for those parcels as well, so that we have a more
Right.
deeper
I
understanding
think that goes under land use.
of what can actually happen with them.
Well, that would be the, you'd be reviewing it. Does it have water? Yes or no? Is it easily accessible? Yes or no? Is it possible to negotiate with the
Cost
landowner?
benefit
Yes or no?
analysis, right?
Yeah, like sort of a whole, cost benefit, is a deal possible? Like, I mean, whenever so it's just sort of like, what's the word?
That's number D.
Viability.
They have-
Like, is it viable?
Well, that's number D right here, encourage strategies to identify more developable land. So they have that here in it already. Support revising the general plan, we're doing that, we're working on it. Seek review of policies for zoning businesses. Encourage considering to whether zoning policies are creating obstacles or consider initiatives to attract new businesses.
And I'm gonna go back to Chris's original recommendation or suggestion or whatever from the very first meeting when you brought it up. Is I'm almost thinking now that we're talking about this out loud, that we take each of those 3 and that's how you start identifying working subgroups. Is because I think that their recommendations are really solid, and what Chris had suggested initially, if you even remember back that far, was how do we create an actionable plan out of a policy or a strategic plan? And I think having subgroups to go back through these and say, okay, that's a really great suggestion that they have. Now what would be actionable? It would be hiring a consultant that would do a land review. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you get from here to what's actionable?
I mean, my question on something like this though is like, what's the value add that we bring to the table? Like, this is like a planning and zoning, there's a planning commission, like there are a lot of other like actors in this
So
space
I'll
that,
tell you,
so we shouldn't take the lead on something
I
like
think
this.
we
I mean, if
should.
we want to
I think we should.
I think that some
Okay,
reason,
but
I feel
let
like
me
you're
think out
stepping on
loud.
their toes,
No,
whose job is to
I
do
don't
that.
think
Like,
so.
the question that we should be asking is, why is this in the economic component of the general plan rather than the land use component of the general plan?
Because
And what's the extra value add that we can offer by having it in here? Like,
here's what the value add is that I think that we
I mean,
offer.
we're not gonna go review all the land, like.
Correct, but
that's
here's
not
what
the-
no,
that's
no,
not our
no.
job.
What I'm saying is where I think, so your question was, where do we add value?
Yeah.
Where I think that we add value is there's no one else sitting today at 9 a.m. in the morning in the county reviewing this plan that we paid a lot of money for to get it to be actionable. And not only do I not have anything to add when it comes to a land use evaluation, I don't even have an opinion about it, but I'll tell you where I do add value, is we're looking at it and we can create a subgroup or whatever and make a list to give to the appropriate people who are doing their day jobs today. So right now today, there is a planning commission person who's doing their day job, who doesn't even know that this is a bullet point of an action item
Well,
in a
Amy's on our-
strategic
Amy's on
plan.
our board and she's gonna receive what we give
Correct,
her to
right,
to
so
keep that up.
What I'm
So
saying
we're-
is,
that it's part of the process.
yeah, what our value add is like looking at it holistically and making sure that we can help facilitate moving it
I
forward.
agree with that.
Like,
Yeah.
I have nothing to add to the subject matter, but to the process, yeah, let's help everyone kind of say, oh, how are we gonna put our loving arms around this plan and help support and facilitate?
So, if I could spell. I don't, I think that, they're looking at the land from an economic standpoint, it's not infinite, like, there's huge chunks of BLM. It's mostly just, where are the sitlo parcels and are there any other, places. I mean, looking at the land from the economic development standpoint is a different way to look at it. And I think as the Economic Development Committee, and because this is all under the Economic Development Department, there's a reason to look at it. This is, if I had 2 interns and a good GIS map, you could do this in 2 days. I mean, this is not like, we don't need to hire someone full time to do this, but it is the sort of the economic review of the land, like looking at it through the lens of economic development, I think is super valuable, and it's not that hard. And when people think, oh my God, I can't believe that Lions Back got to develop that Sitlo parcel, I thought it was public land all the way to the Slick Rock, It's like, no, that's always, I personally have defended that spot twice from oil and gas development. Like, it was gonna get developed one way or another. And so, like, this, because we are so dependent on the land, to not have this be part of an economic strategy seems like a missed opportunity, because it's just a project, and it would be pretty quick, and then you would have an idea like, here's a Sitlo parcel that we should start talking to Sitlo about tomorrow. Like, this is West-wide. Every state trust land around the West, and Flagstaff has state trust land parcels right in their town that they want to work with, and they're stuck and things are happening. They didn't get ahead of it.
Okay, so I'm not
So-
suggesting this, I'm asking you for clarification, because
Okay.
I'm like Mary, sometimes I just
Okay,
want
sorry.
clarification. No, this is perfect.
Yeah.
I am not suggesting we do this.
Okay.
What I'm hearing you say is, instead of Lions Back Resort, had we been talking about this, it could have been a really beautiful, affordable housing with great views
Sure.
instead of a resort.
Sure, you have to get ahead of it. That's the reason. If
Okay.
you really want to solve all the problems that we're identifying, a big piece of solving them is figuring out where we should do
It could
what.
have been micro-unit apartments for workforce housing.
It
who
could
would
have been a
had
trail
ADUs.
system that connected directly to town, that you went up over the ridge and down the ridge on the other
All
side.
right, I'm with you.
It could have been all these different things. But because we weren't involved and Sitlo was acting independently, they did their thing. And
So
so,
there is a whole chapter in the general plan on land use. So just so we know, like, that's gonna be the core of this. Like, what's on our part would be the sort of question to be answered is, how do we connect this to economic development,
right,
right? I mean, I think so I'm not disagreeing with anything that's
Okay.
up there. I'm just saying, like, just like trying to keep us,
think that's
to keep us focused so we can
Well,
like get
and-
through some of this stuff.
But the cost of being too focused is that then you become siloed and you don't see this opportunity that if the land use people are doing their thing and we're not talking to them, then we miss these opportunities.
Totally.
So,
Yep.
and so I think that's part of what we're pointing out here is that there are these cross-department moments of communication that seem really
Maybe
important.
that's
It
like
could
the
even be like-
overview under fundamentals,
Okay,
is that we need to explain that. Like,
Okay.
why is this stuff why are we getting into everybody else's business?
Chris, I think
Right?
that
Like-
having that
Right, like, what's
paragraph,
the connection? Yeah, why are these economic development issues? Right, I mean, I think that's maybe the starting point for the fundamentals section. And the answer to it is like, because right now we don't have housing for our workers, and therefore our businesses can't grow. Because right now we don't have enough workforce, because right now we don't have enough childcare, so we can't have workers, like, and then under land use, you'd make another statement, making that connection explicit. So like, one, people don't feel like we're stepping on their toes. And
yes,
two, they really understand that what we're trying to say is that land use is an economic development issue, especially given our dependence on access to public lands, limited private land availability, et cetera.
so getting down to a river meeting road, which Mary has suggested a few times in a few different meetings, is okay, great, but what are we gonna do? I almost feel like the next steps coming out of this meeting then is literally to draft the language of 3 to 4 paragraphs of overview to bring back to the group for another follow-up
Yeah.
discussion
So
and
I
adoption.
wrote like 1.5 paragraphs
Okay,
as a
well,
starting
that's
point.
sitting here. Right,
So-
would you read them to us?
Yeah, or why don't I mean, I can.
Keep going
I can
and
pass it
then-
around or whatever, but I also think that we have more ideas that we've
Yeah.
already identified. And so I can just send that stuff to Ben,
Mhm.
and then we can, somebody can take a shot at putting some of this additional stuff in there. And then
Mhm.
we can share for review or something like that.
Yeah, I
I
kind
mean,
of feel
what-
like that's,
I
to
don't
me,
know.
that would be
If
the outcome
it's
of this
helpful to read
meeting.
it, I'd be happy to, but.
yeah, I
The
think we should,
deliverable for me would be to have, coming out of this meeting and to be able to bring back to the group, just a really good comprehensive capture of why. Why are we looking at this holistically? Why do we believe it's important for the county to be looking at it holistically? That we can all agree to and kind of put our names to say to the county commission, there's what we're giving you as a summary of how we think that we need to be looking through this lens.
totally agree. Is this capturing what we just talked about, like cross-department initiatives? Like maybe that's part of the overview and then that kind of is where we explain why we talk about land use and kind of setting the stage for everything affects the economy. And there are certain economic initiatives that are just economic. There are others that depend on other departments and other issues. And so we wanted to have a framework. The county should be the convener for these cross-department conversations that could lead to important breakthroughs.
Yes, and I could not be a more zealous advocate for cross-functional working groups.
Yeah.
I think they're amazing.
So-
Cross-functional working groups and teams.
Yeah, I mean, humans like to silo things or to department so that they can stay on track and everything. But the fact is, it's a holistic system.
It's a complex system.
Yeah.
We're dealing with complex systems here, and when you isolate them into individual parts, you lose the comprehensive sum of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. But let's hear your paragraphs.
Okay, I mean, it's really just like a
You're
starting
really
point
good at this,
for,
Chris.
yeah, it's very
But you're
much
good
just
at
like,
this.
I mean, I think that we need a statement about like choosing the language very carefully as to what we're trying to do. Like,
Yeah.
and so it's something like Grand County seeks to develop an economy with, I don't know, well-paying jobs and ample economic opportunity while protecting and strengthening residents' quality of life, maybe on public lands or something like that. But we need like 1 to 2 sentences of kind of like mission statement for what's the economic section of the general plan, or what's the county trying to achieve.
So it is, we want to create an economy that protects public lands, maybe that's not the lead, but we create an economy that provides for our citizens in a sustainably provides for our citizens, something like that. And we really, it is a public land economy. That is what we're talking about. like we're a public land community. So it's almost like we want to create a public land economy that provides for all our citizens.
To be honest with you, that's almost our industry cluster.
Right.
Our industry
Is a
cluster
public land
is
community.
almost a public lands, just like you have a wine cluster or a healthcare
Or a tech
cluster or
cluster
a
or whatever.
technology
We're a
cluster.
public land
We're a
cluster.
public lands cluster. We really are.
And lots of communities around the West are also public land clusters. Jackson Hole.
It's what a gateway
public
community
land
is.
Clusters.
In
Yes.
essence, a gateway community could be
I think a
five
first
as
sentence,
public lands.
a first sentence.
Can we
needs to be
pull
something
from
that
there's a
resonates with
vision
everyone.
and mission in the Trail to Tomorrow that we could pull language from too.
Yeah, so I do have that in, so for one of the most beautiful places on the planet to also be amongst the best places to live, play, work, and do business.
Love it.
That's the vision that they put in there. And the mission, I don't have it right in front of me, but I did try to pull from some
The
of that
mission
stuff.
was,
They say to pair the region's magnificent natural advantages. That's literally what we just said. It's public lands.
Yeah,
But, yeah,
Because I don't own the natural advantages. The county doesn't own them.
right. And that's where I think they make this assumption. They could have spelled that out better. What are the natural advantages? Hello.
Lands.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the following statement should be where you get into each of the categories. So we say to do this, Grant County's policy should promote a healthy tourism sector, nurture business creation and development in tourism adjacent industries, address the needs of fundamentals, including housing, availability, land use, workforce training, regional connectivity, those kind of things.
Yeah, I think that's great.
And then I think we call out the Trail to Tomorrow, I mean, and the work that's been done there. And then you have a section that I haven't written that I think is where we can get into any of the extra key things that need to be there.
and into the goals and the policies, which is typically how your general plan is written. You've got your broad overview of what's important here for our economic development section or economy. And then you go in, based on that, you go into goals and break those down into policies, which are basically the action items for the next 5 years.
Yes, absolutely right, Jasmine.
And those would be under each of these categories. Does that sound right to you, Jasmine? Yeah.
Go. So, I feel like that we need to look through, I feel like we just made a lot of progress. But I wonder if we could, support the commission more by thinking through the action items. Like, we've been at this really high level and I think we're doing a good job of describing it. And I think the big piece that I felt that was missing from the beginning was more explicit mention of the public lands and not making it seem like it's some vague thing that's permanent, because it is not. And then, so I feel like we're dealing with that. And then now the question is, how does this, should we fast forward to the action items, or are we not? Or what?
I think the focus for this group is the action items,
Yeah,
what we can take from this Trail to Tomorrow and turn into action items, not only for the general plan, but also for the Economic Development Office. Because a lot of the stuff in the Trail to Tomorrow is, support this or that, but not a whole lot of action. The one thing I took that we take as an action item was the developing a specific role for housing, for like actually hiring a staff member. There's an action item, right? We need a specific person in that position who can take on that item. And that's an action item. But other than that, there was just like a lot of support this and support that. And how do we specifically support that will become the action items that we take.
Mary, can I ask, Mary, you spoke briefly today and a bit last night about allocating $100,000 towards housing in the future budget. Do you know, is that going to be just like a pass through to HASU, or is the intention to try and bring on a staff member of the county?
I don't think we should bring on a staff member to the county.
Okay.
Because we already have two organizations that are successfully building. I mean, they are successfully more than any other groups, Hasu and the Land Trust
Yeah.
and they're working very closely together. I mean, Caitlin and Ben
Mhm.
communicate almost daily.
Yeah.
I see the money supporting them. I don't think creating
Great.
another person in the county that's under somebody else. Let's take the two organizations that we know have been successful and support them.
Yeah.
As a county, and say, okay, you're being successful, so therefore, and what I'm waiting for and what they're working on together right now
Mhm.
is a plan as to how to take the success from Arroyo Crossing and move it forward. For instance, can they take the success they've used at Arroyo Crossing and create something similar this is why it's so frustrating the city's not here. We could do it at Walnut Lane. Why couldn't we not do that?
So,
They own the land,
yeah,
deed it over to the land trust or Hasu.
Yeah.
But they're staffed out.
yeah,
They're gonna, whoever does something like that and does the next big project.
Yeah.
Needs a staff member to do that. They can't just, Caitlin and Ben are stretched from here to yonder.
well,
So that was a long answer.
No, that's great. And I'll just add that, you're on the housing task force and I'm an active participant on the housing task force. So I think this could be a great example of where the on the ground situation differs slightly from the plan. Maybe some of the recommendations and language could be a pivot from, okay, well, in lieu of having a dedicated county staff member that's working on housing, how are we effectively engaging our other groups through the task force and hopefully through some amount of funding. And I also want to ask the group, do we want, I'm glad to reach out to the city and see if we can get some folks who are more able to make these meetings, because it sounds like that is a missing person at the table.
It's been, maybe you can have the inroads that I know Chris and I have worked really hard on and we've invited them, we pushed it. So, but maybe another person and going to them and talking to them and,
Sure.
yes,
But what about
our
our formal committee? Like,
they're
we're
supposed
getting
to
this
be.
workforce person, and is there a formal spot on our?
There is
For a
already.
city person?
Yeah,
there
And
is.
they just haven't, nobody.
Well, Michael Black is the person. He just became city manager. He's only participated, I don't know, more, 25% of the time, something like that. And so I think the question is, how do we make that work better?
For some
That
reason,
has-
we're having a hard time communicating to the city the value of them being part of this process.
Yeah.
I think they see it, that this is a county committee, and that I don't know what the
Yeah, I
why
mean,
they're so resistant.
exactly. Like maybe there needs to be something else that is city owned in conjunction with being county owned, but that's we need to have a real conversation about that instead of what we've tried to do so far is to invite them into this process. And that hasn't worked.
Well, I've even taken, we did that walk around town.
Yeah.
I mean, we said, okay, let's go and look at the towns, make this more city oriented. But anyway, we could still.
Very good. It's
we can-
annoying computers to. There we go.
So we don't need to
We
spend
can
time.
work on trying to re-engage the city on
And
this.
I think
effort.
I
believe
might
that's
talk,
us.
I'm in communication a lot with Colin, Copper, probably, and Caitlin.
I'll ask a question, ignorance, where does the majority of their funding come from?
So it's changing, but sales tax, but they're now implementing a property tax too. which
Through the
is going to
state
help quite a bit.
or direct? Through the state or direct?
Well, the state administers it all, but it goes straight back. It's earmarked for the city, a specific amount, just as it is for the county. I mean, the county's portion of sales tax also works that way.
And it may help to clarify too, that all of us as municipalities are also required to go through these same general planning processes as the county. So we all have our own general plans. You know, so maybe that there's something other than the county specific general plan that can include the city, like more of a regional look at these things. You know, I mean,
This, I'm not really mad when I say this, the city is part of the county. I mean,
well, we all are, but we don't.
So they're, you know,
Brings to us.
should go away.
But
Anyway.
this is part of the whole siloing that everyone's like, oh, we gotta stay on our mission and stay on our thing, and it gets too complicated, don't make us talk about that. I mean, that's kind of the point. If we can say, hey, we need to set a tone here that has regular opportunities for cross-jurisdictional communication, that is a really important piece, because otherwise, you know, you're missing opportunities to achieve both entities' goals.
Well, and a lot of times too, when we talk about these plans and our focus and our actions, it always includes the city of Moab, right? Always, especially when it comes to economic
Oh,
development.
the daycare, most of the daycare things that have been built in the city.
Right, but
The
in
county is funded it.
we forget that the county is much bigger than that. So like the opportunities to include, say, agriculture when it comes to our wedding industries and other things, forget all of the opportunities you have in places like here, like in Castle Valley, where you have Castle Valley Farms, which has a huge 400 plus acre
Yes,
land in agriculture. You know,
yes.
we ever had a conversation there or with them? So there's other opportunities outside of Moab too, that we have to make sure we keep our mind.
That's why we're happy you're here.
It's important to be here.
So maybe this is worth, you know, I already put down that we should add a statement in the overview section on sort of like cross-department initiatives and the importance of bringing folks from planning and zoning, et cetera, into conversations about economic development, or sort of doing one that's like multi-level as well. I mean, we've also, because in addition to, we've identified very specifically this challenge of coordinating between the city of Moab and the county, but we've also talked about, and Colette has brought up the importance of like connecting state level initiatives to our economic development planning, right?
Oh, you're right.
So that's another, both of those can be examples of areas where we can continually improve, where we can strengthen. So we don't have to just be calling out one thing that requires work, but saying that it's very
Oh, and I
important
think
for the
even-
county to be improving connections between municipal, county, and state level economic development initiatives.
And even like USU, because like in there they say, where was it, was a direct thing about education. Oh, no, I'm thinking that if somewhere I read that one of the things we need is educating English as a second language and dealing with
Yeah,
that.
that's in here.
Yes, in here. Well, USU is doing that. So let's see how we can, you know, work with that, you know, rather than creating these things, finding where it's already established and we can just support that and enhance that. So the other thing that was mentioned in there was the nonprofits.
Mhm.
And having the nonprofits have a way that the tourists could give money easily to the nonprofits, and then we distribute it. Well, why should the county or the city take that on when we already have a nonprofit lobby that's somewhat doing that? So work with, you know, what I see when I read this, I felt like a lot of it wasn't that we ourselves do it. We
Yeah.
support
You know, one of those
the other groups.
Yeah, a great example of, so we started, there's this nonprofit that was the sister organization of Trail Mix that's kind of died a little bit because Trail Mix has been so healthy. That might be about to change dramatically, I don't know, but,
Let's pray not. Just pray.
well, anyway, so before Trail Mix was so well established, the nonprofit, the Moab Trails Alliance, sold paper maps. And I actually thought this was gonna be a terrible idea, and it turned into a great idea. And we raised
GPS there.
$30,000 for trail maintenance through these $2 paper maps.
That's amazing.
And I think there's still, I don't even know what's going on with it, but that's the point of how do you find ways for tourists to give money is you have to provide them with something. They're not just gonna, out of the goodness of their heart, suddenly donate. Like, that's really hard. But if there's something that makes their journey more convenient or more fun or cooler or whatever that they can buy, that then gives that nonprofit
That
money.
goes back, yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
and that's sort of under entrepreneurship, really, like.
What Mary said, yeah, tied in with what you just said. What Mary said is touching on the general feeling that I have. So here's my general sense of things, right? So, and it was what I was saying earlier when I said, what is our role? Is if we look at our economic ecosystem and a healthy economy, a prosperous economy, to me, the biggest opportunity is that the reason why business organizations are so successful is that they're tied together. You've got a product development team that's creating product. You've got a marketing team that's marketing that product. You have a finance team that is managing and cash flowing that product. And everybody is working together with this same unified goal, which is we create the premier widgets for sell globally. And we do that successfully through our vision, right? In government, you've got city and county and nonprofits and businesses and entrepreneurship. And for me, looking at an economic ecosystem, the biggest opportunity is organically you're operating almost like a business, right? We've got these nonprofit organizations that are already doing this. We don't want to reinvent the
We
wheel.
already have that
So
department.
we want you guys to create a product for us, like a map that you can sell and how to give back. Wabi Sabi, you're already organizing these nonprofits. I feel like that's what the opportunity is for economic advisory board and looking for good projects and looking for whatever is saying, how do we treat this like one healthy organism by not stepping on toes,
Yeah.
by working together with
And
whatever
another
it's
one that I
doing.
think in Alpine that should be a priority is supporting our small businesses, right? And the
100%.
key there is that we haven't been in Grant County receiving the support that the state is supposed to be offering and paying for because we don't have a position at the Small Business Development Council, because of things like that. And so it seems to me a priority item under section 2, which is supporting entrepreneurs, right? Includes supporting entrepreneurship would be, making sure that we're working effectively together with the state to get the support for our local small businesses that we deserve.
Yes, and one of the
State
things, oh, I'm sorry, Mary. Go ahead.
We just already have that avenue. I mean, Colette has been so gracious
Yeah,
with the
she's-
time she spends with us.
Yep.
That I think we should take advantage. She seems to have a carrot. She seems to have a real,
She wants to help us make sure that we get that support.
So hang on, well, sorry, I don't want
I'm just saying, we already have that person, so how do we better take advantage of Colette? How do we, the service she's offered, how are we following up on that?
Yeah.
It's probably been offered and it's just floating out there.
Yeah.
So, okay, 2 things. One, this disconnect that you mentioned about, or seeing it as a whole organization.
That's just my sense, it may or may not be
It's a
real.
massive gateway community problem westwide. It's a huge, because think about it, for the whole history of this, the tourism people, the marketing department is doing their thing, not talking to
The
the product development people. That is the structure that we live in, that the marketing department, the tourism, each state's tourism is doing their thing and they don't talk to the lane managers.
And your operations folks are your fundamental housing, childcare, you know what I mean? Like operations is.
Right, the
how we-
operations, yeah.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the problems that a lot of these types of reports really miss. And they forget to go back and say, wait a minute, the product is public lands and the marketing is the tourism people, and how are they? So we, the locals, need to make sure that when something like the Mighty Five happens, that we have, and Natalie, I think, is really working on this, of trying to connect that better. But if we can set the tone for that connectivity and seeing it as related efforts, that would be great. And part of that is institutionalizing this cross-jurisdictional communication so that the reason Trail Mix has been so successful and has been copied around the country is that the county hosting a trails meeting every month, all the agencies had to attend because it was the county.
The county, that's why I asked, by the way, where the money came from. So when I was saying like, where does the money come from, right? Is because you almost, you gotta have a carrot and a stick
Right.
sometimes to get everybody at the table, because we're not one unified business or one unified organism. You're a bunch of nonprofits and a county
Right.
government and a city
But
government and a bunch of.
So that wasn't a money thing,
We
just,
somehow need to communicate to everyone. And it goes back to the education part, because there are a group of people, I mean, like she talks about, our public lands are in danger. Our trail mix, they want to defund trail mix. The group that was just recently elected wants to defund trail mix.
and that's not a money thing. That is a government policy thing. Because the county is a cooperating agency with the BLM, the Park Service, and the Forest Service, that is why they had to come to the meeting. And that is why we were able to execute.
Money is
the two
just
things.
one lever.
Yes, you're right.
I want to know what the levers are.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a lever. Like if the county eliminates trail mix, they are eliminating that relationship, the manifestation of that relationship. And that is how we in Grand County have implemented, I'm just gonna use the word control over our public lands. We wanted those trails to be built. We wanted those ambassadors to be out there. And because that happened, the lane managers had to do it because the county it was a county-sponsored committee. This is really, you can't, if you pawn that off to a nonprofit, it's much harder. There are nonprofits that do function very highly, like the one in Durango, but they have a lot bigger budgets than we have ever had here. And so if you don't have money, you gotta use a different lever.
But getting back to, and again, it's not that I'm trying to harp, it's just that I've got this sense of things and I'm trying to bring it down into a solid anchor.
Sure.
This type of process is how we are able to make that business argument. Like if we're running like a business instead of like a bunch of different entities, right? And we're all collaborating and coordinating together. And we're able to show that plan. This is how we fund our business. This is our business model. That becomes a different conversation to anyone who's trying to fund that. That's what, and I'm having a hard time articulating it because I feel like as we get closer and closer to the center, it gets easier and easier to articulate. Is for me, it's almost like we need a business plan.
I think that's
And this
where,
is the
that's where
business
like
plan.
number one needs to get fleshed out a little bit more. Is
Yes.
like, and that's what, I mean.
Because this is all driving
This
number one.
conversation needs to we need to capture it somehow, which I mean, we have access to public lands, but like, how does this, I don't know, how does the business model
It's almost
work
like
or
our
whatever? And I think
overview
Ashley has like
is-
said it probably multiple
Yes.
times. We just somehow need to make sure it gets captured.
And I do think that sometimes these types of meetings feel so frustrating and overwhelming to everyone because they feel nebulous and they feel like, hey, we're not getting anywhere, we're not, and that's why that zoom in, zoom out is so helpful, is because I just have this sense that up in all of this gets organized into one business plan that we say, this is how we are a healthy, economically prosperous business. Don't mess with these public lands. Don't mess with this funding
Trail mix.
for this type of group.
Don't
Because
get
look,
rid of
this is our
trail
business
ambassadors.
plan.
Here we get a national award for trail ambassadors and they want to get rid of it.
Here's what it is right here. To meet all visitor activities. So the problem is they feel that non-motorized has gotten too much money and time and motorized has not.
So we started.
So what I would
I know, but
what I
that's-
would suggest in that section is instead of like offering recommendations that run contrary to what you know that members of the commission will be their perspectives on this, would be to make the case for the value of what's been done historically and then let them, I mean, like if you say
Yeah.
do this to somebody that already has proposed, I want to do that,
Yeah.
you're just going to create a push and a
Yeah,
pull.
right.
But I think there's a softer way to talk about this stuff that
Okay.
can still be really useful.
And I think the
I don't
softer
think we have to like
way,
lean away from it. We just have to do it in
Sure.
a creative, strategic way.
I feel like the softer strategic way that we do that is we don't get that detailed, meaning what is this number one customer, these 3 million folks that are gonna come here, that we've already said is pretty much, I would say 95% of our opportunity and 95% of our challenge. How then would we define them? What do we want that customer to look like? And I don't think it looks like motorized versus on foot or blah, blah, blah. It almost starts with how much money you got.
Well.
What's your
You have to
aptitude
be-
for spending
You
that
have to be
money?
really careful about that.
Okay,
Because, so there is a whole section in here that was taken from Public Land Solutions. There's a
They
page,
mentioned it.
and it talks about just exactly that, the breakdown of these 3 million visitors and who's doing what and why.
Yes.
And so this customer breakdown that you're talking about is
in my
It's in
business
there.
plan, it's my key target audience.
yes, and so, but the problem is, shoot, I'm gonna have to call her back, but,
We started.
sorry.
The problem is-
My mom's a caregiver, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, you need to go answer
In
that.
a second, but, sorry. So in the report, we talk about this, and it is a really important, component of the action plan. But what I'm cautioning against saying who spends the most money, let's focus on them. Because there's a lot of ways to measure how the money is spent. And there's a lot of confusing aspects. For example, on the motorized side, if you include the price of the machine, that category spends more money because you spend more money on your motorized. It costs more than a bicycle or a pair of hiking shoes.
But you don't hear, so
That's
yes,
right.
and
But
here's
it
what I
gets
wanna do.
really convoluted really quickly.
But maybe it doesn't, maybe it doesn't. So like, these are the conversations where, and this is why I love being challenged more than I love being agreed with,
Mhm.
is because you start to get a better sense of what you're talking about. I'm not suggesting that we do this, okay? So please, I'm just using this as an example.
Yeah.
If we get, like Chris was saying, like more strategic and a little less detailed about whatever, and instead we say, what do they look like? Who are we attracting? It drives a lot of policy discussions, like for example, is it motorized or non-motorized? Because we're not selling them their UTV if they're bringing it in.
Right.
But one thing that we could say that we're going to do, and again, not a suggestion, we are going to allow you to go without this really expensive permit or a local guide. Because we want you to pay for a local guide. Maybe we want you to have a motorized vehicle all day long, but you're going to have to sign up for one of our groups who have special permitting to do special things, or you pay double for a non-guided
Okay.
admission, or I don't even know that that's legal or possible. I'm just saying it drives policy.
No, yeah, there are ways to drive the policy that, and this is basically where I live, that aren't quite as overreaching as what you just
No,
described.
that's why I'm
But-
saying.
Yeah,
not a
and I get it,
suggestion.
it's an example, but part of it has to do with, the main thing is, multiple days, okay? There's, and I'm not gonna go through all of this right here, but
Sure.
these are some of the high categories.
Stay longer, spend more.
Stay longer, right? Multiple day trips. And so to do that, we work hard on explaining you're a beginner OHVer. Here's the learn to drive loop, and here's 2 other loops that you could do. So now you want to stay for 3 days. Another great example is if you're a hiker, right?
Guided.
Mhm.
Right, if guided is important, but it's you're not going to get everyone to be guided.
No,
The
but-
other,
That's something we want to promote, right?
sure, and we do have a lot of that, but so there's.
You could call out a bunch of those things.
No, no,
And then describe how that,
It's partly in there.
yeah.
And this managing user groups is what we're talking about here.
Yes,
And a big part of it, the other piece of it is where they stay, camp versus hotel. And then Airbnb is a huge problem because they walk into their own, they walk into their own house and get the food out of their refrigerator and they put it in a cooler and they drop them off and they rent an Airbnb and they put it in that refrigerator and then they can spend almost nothing here.
Mhm.
So there's a bunch of dynamics here.
Yes.
What are they doing and where are they staying and where are they eating? And so there's a whole lot, this is a whole big category that the county may not get to the micro level on. Or I'm not sure who can do it, but part of it starts with the way you spend your tourism dollars. So the whole idea is that if you're sending out emails to hiker X and you're advertising in social media that is followed by hikers, and you say, come to Moab, don't just hike in Arches, but here's 50 miles of trail that the BLM just marked, that so you need to stay 3 days and do hiking. So it's about going to where they are, the father of interpretation to the Park Service always says, start where they are. If you're explaining the Grand Canyon, say, do you have a stream that you've seen flood? So start where they are. Who are they? What are their goals? What do they want to do? And how do we talk to them in a way that will inspire them to do the things that we want them to do?
And back to that driving, number one, when I'm talking about you operate an economic ecosystem like a business.
Right.
What do businesses do? They create personas.
Right.
They develop
That's what
user
these are.
journeys. That's just a persona.
With the user
and a
journey.
user
That's
journey.
right. That's exactly
And I've
right.
got user journeys for every one of my personas.
Right. And
and
your
that's driving my marketing
marketing
team.
strategy is driven by those personas.
And my product development team is coordinating with my
Yes.
marketing
Yes.
development team. And now we are one business.
So you and I totally get that because we live in that space.
Yes.
And, but I think that maybe you and I need to write a page about this that could help support the team of Ben's and help them sort of take this business model and see what we can do to make it into a government model that will actually function. And because this is like keeping the public lands and getting the visitors to come and seeing them this way is the key to everything. And another way to say this is instead of saying, come to Moab, come to Moab, come to Moab, and then when you get here, oh, wait a minute, recreate responsibly. It's like, no, you build the message in, you educate, inspire, and invite.
Let me sell you the way that you will
Yes.
recreate responsibly.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And this is like cutting edge outdoor recreation management,
100%.
outdoor industry that Moab needs
Yes.
to get on board with.
And the passion where I live and breathe, that number two, that I would love to help businesses with and gets me excited, is that every single business that is operating in that number two is a subcategory of that target audience that we are selling
And they
to.
already are.
For your wedding,
Yeah.
for your coffee flight tasting, for your wine tasting, for your,
Well, this is an overlap thing. The
Yes.
reason someone has a wedding here is because they're into mountain biking and they know their friends are gonna wanna come to their wedding, because
Our
they're also
public
gonna get
lands.
to go mountain biking.
That's why it's tourism adjacent.
Exactly.
yes.
Because it's
100%,
more business and
yes.
that we're building it up.
This
to-
right
to
here,
be
what I'm
product.
talking about,
Yeah.
this
Public
is
lands is our
core.
business.
This is core, this is
Where's
our
our asset?
core business.
Yes.
And we're not managing it very well, because our marketing department and product development don't even talk.
Mhm.
And because
Forget operations and finance.
we're doing this thing where we're inviting them and trying to tell them something, but we talk to them in way too generic a way.
Mhm.
And that's where this is how I got to this place, is that it's like, stop calling the adventurers tourists. They are insulted to be called tourists. They're passionate about whatever it is they do. They've spent money and time. It's part of their identity. They own Moab. They see Moab as their mecca. This is for mountain biking, climbing, OHV. This is for so many categories, and we don't even tap into this. And so we have this opportunity to say, we are your place, and we welcome you. And you can't call yourself a side-by-side OHVer if you haven't been to Moab and done these things. And we need to be tapping into that and
And I-
inviting them and directing them to do the thing
Yes.
that
So
we
I'm
want them to
totally
do.
on board with like the approach that you've described, and I've heard you describe it many times, and you've like completely sold me on it conceptually. But there's like a missing piece that I haven't really like gotten yet, which is like what I hear you saying is that we can do exactly what they say, which is like engineer tourism. They say to support community happiness, to support building the community we want, whatever. But like, okay, and then so now we think about them as not just tourists, but like different categories. We think about some of the things that we want to do, like what the user groups we prefer are, but like, I don't know,
No,
like
that's
what's the nuts and like what is it actually like
Okay.
who are the users we really
Okay,
want?
you don't want to ask that question.
Okay,
And
why not?
I'm gonna back up and say why.
Yeah.
You want a broad range of customers, and you don't want, if you zero in.
Then how do I
only
make
one
sure that
customer,
it benefits our community?
but
If
it's
I
a
just
different
take
question.
everyone.
We're gonna take everyone
Okay.
because we have the assets to take everyone.
Okay.
I've worked in communities who are like, we don't have fishing, really. There's no fishing. we don't invite fishermen, that's one group we took off the list. But
Yeah.
unlike most, yeah, exactly. But unlike most places that only have a few things, we do have
We have a
everything.
lot, yeah.
We have base jumping, we have
Sure.
everything. So what you have to do is do the work to make sure that each visitor in every category is staying multiple days, feels connection to us. They're not transactional. They're not like Moab, Zion, Vegas. They're Moab. Like, we should be able to get people to come from Europe and spend 5 days in Moab and feel like they had an incredible time instead of being tempted to drive all over the place, you know?
So we want them
To
to
go-
stay a long time and spend a lot of money.
Stay
We
a
want
long
them to
time.
have brand loyalty to Moab.
We want them to feel like this
Which
is
is-
this is
they're
a place
home away
that,
from
it's
home.
like
They're-
Paris.
yeah.
You go
Invest
to Paris
in
one
our-
time and you're like, that was cool, I went to Paris, but I could go to Paris every year.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Paris is infinite. Moab is infinite. We should be
Yes.
inviting people who, because we have this whole category, sure, there's gonna be one-time visitors, fine. And those are mostly the sightseers.
What's the
But the
engineering you're
adventurers are
doing?
gonna-
Besides just
So
growing,
here's how I
like,
would
hear you-
engineer.
I hear you growing, but like, what's the,
No.
how are we tailoring
Let me
it
tell
to
you
our
how I would
needs?
tailor it. Like, I will give you an answer. First of all, to me, it's the attorney in me. I can't help it. I am so laser focused on words and the importance of words and the precision with which we use them, because I think that they define exactly what we're trying to say. So for me, the word that I would say, if I were going to engineer who our target audience is, I would begin with not looking at them as a visitor or a tourist. I would look at them as, we are looking for sojourners. So if you Google definition for sojourner, so Google,
I don't know.
oh, does someone have an internet?
It's a-
I mean, but we.
It's
somebody
a
on
funny word,
journey-
sojourners
No,
comes
it's-
up.
No.
It's a great word because I get where you're going on that. It just doesn't market test very well.
No, I'm not saying for marketing, but what
Okay.
I'm saying is, okay, so a sojourner is a person who temporarily resides in a place that is not primarily their own.
There
We
you go.
want them to reside here. You're a part of our community. We want you to know who we are, what we value, what's important to us. We want to welcome you as an honored guest. And what do honored guests do? They don't shut up the place.
Right.
They invest in what we're invested in. They want to stay a long time and they want to immerse themselves in our culture. What is our culture? That's part of our engineering.
Plans.
Who are we? We need to have our own persona, right? What do we value? What's important to us? If I'm going to invite you in as an honored guest and a sojourner who is making your home here temporarily, then I want you to understand how we see our home, right? And that starts with things like, are you a beginning off-roader?
Well,
Are you a beginning hiker, Ashley,
Yeah.
what you were saying?
Yeah.
And if so, let us tell you, this is how we do it here. We have these trails that are appropriate for you. We have these trails that we prefer that you hire a guide. We have these sets of, and it goes the same for hikers and for our European guests who are coming by bus and going from park to park to park. We're setting the stage for them. To me, what engineering is just good architecture. We are saying to them, this is what we want you to experience and do. We're going to give you all of these categories, and we're going to have some yahoos that are going to come and do whatever the hell. But the more architectured and the more engineered we are, the fewer people who are going to come and just do whatever the hell. Because
Right.
we've marketed to these folks. Ben, sorry.
Don't apologize.
Oh, no.
No, it's great.
As an
Oh.
action item, like, who are we putting that responsibility on? The county?
Ben, the bands.
Well, I think
That's why I keep coming back to
If the tourism-
cross-functional teams.
if the travel council, whatever we're calling them, I can't get the new name straight. TCAP. So this is another cross
Yes.
jurisdictional
For sure.
thing where, when I first started thinking about this and put this together, Ben had me go to the TCAP meeting and I hadn't fully enunciated, I didn't have PowerPoint or anything. And then, of course, they ran out of time, so I was supposed to explain it all in 6 seconds or something. So that didn't go that great. But I think that reaching out to them, our committee reaching out to them and saying, hey, here's some things we've learned from the program. We paid a lot of money for, and we'd like to have a joint meeting with y'all and talk through some of this stuff. I think that would be a great way to do it because I feel like
I would like that.
It goes back to the history. The tourism people didn't talk to anyone. The other piece that is, you're gonna love this piece, is that guess what? We have an expert in every single user group that lives right here in this town. And they can tell us,
Yes.
let's just say you wanna grow base jumping. Not sure about that, but we'll use it as an example for a minute. Just teasing.
My tagline to them is not a matter of if, but when.
I know, it's crazy, but whatever. Pick any category. Hiking. I think hiking is the underdeveloped, incredible asset that we have never truly marketed and that could get us a lot of really dedicated people who are gonna, by definition, stay on the trail. They're gonna stay in hotels. They don't need a giant house with a big garage to put all their stuff in. They'll stay in hotels, they'll eat at restaurants, and they could do day hikes for the rest of their lives here. And they could come every year and do 3 to 5 days worth of hiking. And so if you say, okay, how do we invite them? What channels do we use? And so to me, it's about taking the marketing money that we have and starting to divide it up by user group and looking at targeted campaigns that use the expertise. And if we don't have and tapping into the experts that we have here. So on the OHV side, how do we talk to our OHV folks and say what they use, mostly Onyx as their mapping thing. Is there an opportunity to advertise on Onyx? I'm not sure, but where are the forums? Where are people going to learn about where to go OHV? How do we speak to them in an authentic way that is truly inviting them, but not inviting them, like there are all these communities that say, we want OHV, and I say, great, where do you want the OHVs to go? And they're like, we have all these miles. I say, you cannot invite people to go to your county and drive around in circles on the roads. You gotta name them and designate them by difficulty and communicate that to the folks. Ben.
Okay, just a functional point here. So we're planned to go to noon. If we think we can put a bow on this in the next 5 minutes, I know that Mary's presence is being requested at the Housing Task Force meeting at 11:30.
Oh, forgot all.
No, it's fine. And I would attend. I would attend if possible. So I don't want to cut this short. If it feels like the next 35 minutes could be very productive, then please let's keep meeting. But I wanted to see if we feel like we can wrap up in 5 minutes. If not, that's fine.
I love that, and almost what I would say is it feels like it's super, super productive and continue to be so. And for me, that would be more of a reason to say, I think we should do this again quick and start divvying stuff up.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that I would say to follow up on what you said is I think it doesn't feel comfortable for me to split necessarily inorganically tourism and economic development, because I think they're both. And I think collaborating with TCAP is critical because they're making the recommendations about how to spend the money. We have recommendations about how we would like to grow our economy. And between those two things, it's almost sort of like, hey, have we considered spending a check on this? So that they can say, oh, well, yeah, we might consider recommending.
I think it's super important
And
because
they're meeting over there for Fifth West now.
Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
well, I think we can wrap up if you like, and we could always have like a casual chit chat for those of us that don't have to run off.
Sure.
Maybe we could close the meeting and then we could kind of dive into.
I mean, I think
I want to go
ahead.
for it.
So drafting, we could do like a drafting.
Because I
Yeah.
did a lot of work for them just recently, so I want to report to them. But I wanted to say that what I see around this table is some people that have some real skills. Like Chris, you seem to be able to really take these big things and pull them together. It's when I won't ever forget the time you organized the events. I mean, it was just amazing, you know? So, you know, we might want to start, maybe while I'm gone, you guys can say, okay, we, you know, kind of give each member of this task, like, this could be your focus, this could be your focus. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then plan a meeting for, you know, week or two.
We definitely, it feels like we need to draft a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I think what I would
think, and I would ask Ben if he agrees with this because would be a big part of the next step. But if we all, I mean, I've taken some notes and have notes I can send to
Forward
Ben.
that to me.
We have
With
what's
your
up on the
notes,
board.
With your notes, I like your notes.
And then if anybody, I think, has an important point that we don't feel like is adequately captured here, but you want to make sure is in the general plan that was a part of this meeting, like write that up and send it to Ben. And then, I mean, ideally, we could have like a draft or some language that we
I do
could
have.
work with before we host another meeting. It'd be great to have something concrete that's
I'm
come
gonna
from
just
this
go and do
meeting.
a Zoom right here, so I.
How would you guys feel about this? Before it goes to Ben and Jasmine, I'm so sorry, I don't know where the camera is and I feel like I'm not looking at you because I don't know where the camera is.
It's
But I
fine.
kind of, before it goes to Ben, how would you guys feel about, I would love to take a crack at capturing an overview that, and I want to say this out loud so that people can add things that I'm missing or say, no, we don't think that should go in there. I would love to take a crack at capturing this with an overview that emphasizes the importance of that opportunity challenge bucket that is public lands. Because I do think that it was underserved a little bit in the Trails to Tomorrow report. So doing that overview that captures all of this conversation that we had today, that captures in bullet points and sections that phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or path 1, path 2, path 3, and circulate it to this group to review it and look at it and pick it apart and edit it. And then we can do all of that via email or phone call or whatever, and then send that to Ben with everyone on copy. And then we use that as the basis then for the next meeting that we can schedule at this meeting. And then that's where we would begin.
Yeah.
Or maybe
that's good.
at our next regular meeting too, which would be the 20th, right? So that's coming right up.
Mhm.
Whatever you guys suggest, I don't have an
Okay.
opinion about that process.
If you're, I think it'd be awesome. I think you would do a great job. And I think that would be
I think
giving us
that's
something to
overselling
pick
it a
apart
little
and
bit,
add
but
and
picking
whatever.
apart, yeah.
Yeah, would be giving us, this framework would be great. There's a couple quick details. One is that this absence of the mention of public land is universal. Everyone takes it for granted, so I don't blame them for not doing that. And if I had been a little more on top of it when she gave it to me, I would have pushed that further then anyway. But anyway, so that's one thing. The second thing is I just want to, when you get to the details of how to do it and how to maximize our visitors so that for local benefit, like how do we get the most out of these visitors to have the healthiest economy we can? You definitely, it is the natural business thinking thing, which is our biggest revenue generator, which is the most profitable. The reason you can't ask that question is, or that I don't think it's a good idea, is that part of what the strength of MOB is the diversity of activities that we offer. And the trick is if we can get each category to spend more days, to spend more money, then we're winning. And there's certain categories where it's easier than others. And I've seen studies about spending which really involve way too many assumptions. They just become like the hiking community gives this much to this town. It's like, yeah, by the time you get to a dollar figure, it's just like really a lot of assumptions got made. So instead it's more about how do we invest in all the categories, and then how do those categories relate to these categories? How do we make sure that the climbers buy art or get a massage or something, right? Like how do you
I could agree.
Fundamentals, because without those fundamentals of do we have adequate housing, then are we actually going to be able to support these 3 million different users?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I do think I couldn't agree with you more. And the reason why I think it's so important is because then that's when you get your business development and your sales team. So you've got your marketing. Now we've got our business development and our sales team. And what they're doing is literally they're taking hiking as a category.
Mhm.
And they're saying, now what are all my sales opportunities to anyone who hikes? So we've got a yarn class in town, right?
Right.
Because I talked to her yesterday and she teaches fiber classes.
Right.
How do you do a 3-day retreat for all knitters
Sure.
where 2 days are classes and then we have this guided nature hike? 'Cause
Or
everyone can
sightseeing
hike.
opportunity. Not everyone can hike. That's another thing you gotta be really careful about.
Walking.
Whatever, yeah.
Walking through the
Sightseeing.
parks, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We've got amazing tour companies that do guided through the park and we can get out and walk someone up to the arch and walk someone back to the arch. but you've got that business development and sales who is selling through 30 different ways. And when you said, how do we engineer? That to me is part of the engineering process. Is you say, what are all of the different products that we have available? And then you've got sales and business development folks that are literally coming up with 40 different ways to package.
Well, and this is like, in a high functioning economy like Durango, their nonprofit trails group says, hey, they are business development. They say, oh, we've got people that want more downhill trails. Because they have the strong relationship with the land managers and they've been able to get even some private land and do these creative solutions, that product development is happening. So the challenge is, if you draft this thing in your business brain and you talk about these functions, right?
I'm up here.
Well, no, but the point, the challenge is translating it from the business thing that you and I are comfortable with to the government.
But I think there's another piece, which is making sure that the description of the business model or the plan meets the public and their goals. And so, in here, and we saw the survey work that they did and everything for Trail to Tomorrow. I mean, one of the main things that came from that was that what people from Moab prioritize are visitors that value and take care of the environment, right? That take care. And so, I mean, that was part of the question that I was trying to drive it when I say how are we engineering? And what I heard, the piece that is sticking with me is that we're looking for people that, and we're going to cultivate their development of a deep connection to Moab so that they have buy-in to protect, because it feels like their public lands also, right? And so they want to protect it, they want to treat it right, and we're going to help teach them how to do that. And by the way, you're going to spend some money while you do that, right? But that to me, if that part isn't articulated well, then people are going to hear that you're just trying to do more instead of better, which is what they need to hear for there to be buy-in.
That's why I keep coming back to Sojourner. I don't want to use the word, but I am very attached to the sentiment, which is we want you to come here as a welcome, honored guest and co-inhabitant. And it's almost like, because that's how your marketing campaigns get driven, is what is our philosophy and what are we trying to accomplish? You can almost, and again, I'm not suggesting this, these are just examples is things like don't be a tourist.
Right.
Like tongue-in-cheeky social media campaigns where you have locals saying, what's the dumbest shit I've ever seen a tourist do? And you almost have these really funny, I saw a tourist. Well,
yeah, that's kind of like the
don't be a tourist.
Campaign.
Yeah, don't be a tourist, or come be local-ish, right?
But
also these are your public lands, they're not just we're not just you're not just borrowing them for a couple of days, we all own them together. I don't know, there's all sorts of ways to mess with this. But that was,
here's another piece. Every sport activity user group, hikers, bikers, OHV, boaters, climbers, all the dozens of user groups that we have, those people's passion depends on public land. You can't do half the things we offer here in Texas anywhere because there's no public land. So they already have a relationship with the public land.
Right.
Now, it's a little different groups
or an
have different
aspirational one even or something.
But they know that in Chicago, you can only go to the Cook Preserve to ride your bike. Right. In Moab, we have 150 miles.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is tap into them who already have a passion that depends on public lands and share our public lands with them. So we don't have to teach them all about love of public lands. That's already part of the culture of the activity that they do. And I'm not saying the whole world is divided up into these activities, but a big chunk of the 3 million is. And then the other chunk is these sightseers. And that's why that distinction is really important. The sightseers they're just a whole different can of worms. They have whole different abilities and goals, and they're a whole different thing. And so that's why it's so important that every marketing dollar we spend, we need to make the decision. Are we going for a sightseer with this dollar? Are we going for an adventurer? And if we can start to make that distinction, then this part of cultivating the relationship with Moab, it's just below the surface for all these people.
But to follow that out, I agree with you 100%. And I think what I would love to capture is that's what a gateway community is. These are your public lands. Everyone's coming to enjoy the public lands, but you're tracking through our home.
Yeah.
And how we're engineering and architecting is you wipe your feet at the mat, you bring a hostess gift,
Right.
and you contribute to engaging conversation. Because we are not the public lands. We're a welcoming community that you have to walk through to get to the rest of them.
Yes.
How do we teach you to be welcome guests? And I think it can't just be, we know you're gonna come here, recreate responsibly. I wanna give you a guide. I wanna engineer and architect the experience that allows you to do that. These are the types of hostess gifts we enjoy.
Yeah.
We drink red, not white.
Yeah, exactly.
We like, you know what I mean?
No, that level of detail is what, so I'm just gonna give a little tiny picture of what happened to mountain biking in the last 20 years. Mountain bikers were, when I was the chair of the International Mountain Bicycling Association, every day a trail system didn't close to mountain biking was a good day. Because all trails had been built for hiking. No trails had been built for mountain biking. So we had to prove the value of our constituency to get access. We had to paint the picnic tables, build the trails. And the main thing that we did is we became expert trail builders. And I mean, how do we build a sustainable trail that's not gonna have puddles? Because the whole issue was, how do we ride through the puddles, around them or through them? And it was like, can we get past the puddles? So that evolution, that point of proving the value of our constituency is kind of what we're talking about. We want each of these constituencies to prove their value to us as Moab. And the way they do that is behave how we want them to when they're here.
Bring a nice bottle, wipe your feet.
Yeah. And
Have
those
something
things that you're
interesting to
saying.
say.
So, yeah, right. Don't.
Well, maybe that's part of the focus, but what about what are we bringing them is also part of that focus.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes,
So it's the partnership between, so this partnership between the Gateway community and the visitor, like we're giving you an opportunity to pursue your passion,
Yes,
you know, opportunity to do the thing you're passionate about.
yes.
And don't
And
talk about.
also, you know, and this is why this messaging and these conversations are so important. We're giving them some other things too. When you break that collarbone,
Yeah,
we've got the best in the business that are gonna come out and find you on that trail
right,
and schlep you to a state-of-the-art facility.
that's right. And so all these pieces are,
What?
so it's just, I mean, I think that if we can find ways to enunciate this,
Yeah.
that's not, I don't want to trigger or insult anyone.
No, building
Ever.
a partnership with the user group sounds like a great idea. I don't think that you could really say that we've done a great job with a lot of user groups.
Well-
And mountain biking might be the exception to
Mountain
that,
biking is definitely,
but, which is cool. Then we have
but
an
it's
example of how to do it.
because
So we
we're
need to
only
then,
30 years old or whatever.
yeah,
And so because mountain biking was new on the scene, we had to have ethics. We had to bring a hostess gift. We had to
I
be.
think some of the other user groups can relate to some of that stuff.
Well, and here's, I
Like,
think
I mean-
there's a huge opportunity to take the model that we used in mountain biking to get to where it is today, which
Yeah.
is literally every single community in the country is trying to build trails right now.
Sure.
So that is, but the industry, the bike industry did certain things to support that. And we got non-endemics. Subaru gave us 10 cars and $200,000 a year for 20 years to help teach people how to build trails.
Yeah.
And we had the Subaru Imba Trail Care crew driving all over the place. Where is Yamaha? Where is Polaris? Hello, guys. And so I had started a conversation before COVID with some of their folks in DC, but there's an opportunity to say Moab, and we need to talk to all the OHV people about this, and I've started this conversation, but it's like, hey, Moab can be the model place for proving the value of your constituency.
Mhm.
So why, if you guys give us a little money to mark a beginner, in Farmington, one of the things Public Land Solutions recommended was a learn to drive route. We could have one of those.
Totally.
So there are these seem like really micro details, but they are the building blocks of our economy. And so if we can set the stage for this, create these cross-jurisdictional conversations, reach out to TAP, what did they, I can't get this right. The Tourism Committee, UTAP. Is that what? TCAP. What is wrong with my brain on that? Okay, TCAP. If we could reach out to the TCAP folks and and if we can enunciate this, if you take a crack at writing it and we play with it a little bit more and then we bring them in, they've got obviously really good insights. They've been banging their heads against us well for a while, working on all these issues. So we need to say, here's what we're thinking. How does that relate to your experience?
Yeah.
And see what they can get and see if we can get to this place. And if we come to the commission with this kind of unified, like, here's this plan, and we can get, and it depends on getting all the leaders in each of these activities to buy into it, then the commission's gonna be like, okay,
Sure.
you know?
I think there's a delicate balance there between like building constituencies out, but getting buy-in, and broadening a process so far that you can't get buy-in. That you know, inevitably people will disagree with different things and whatever, and we ought to listen to them. I'm not suggesting we don't do it, but I also think that like, yeah, process-wise, we ought to be careful not to overextend ourselves too. If we just keep getting broader, create a working group on this, and the other thing,
Yeah.
and you can't reach consensus on them, then all of a sudden this whole thing is.
Well,
I
the
agree.
spend
Let's not do
Chris?
that too.
What I would like to do, and this is, again, I'm saying this out loud for feedback, not because I think it's how we should do it. What I would like to do is capture pretty much what you see on the board as the level of detail.
Mhm.
And then when we feel like we have buy-in and everyone goes, yeah, okay, I feel pretty good about that overview, or here's what I think is missing, or whatever, then it's kind of that structure that gets submitted to the commission to say, can we all agree that this is sort of the approach that we would like to take?
Well, I think we want to use what Ben has offered also, and the process that the different departments work through to collaborate as a vehicle for this. I don't think we want to like try to bypass that at all. And like, I
Definitely
mean,
not.
No.
Ben is going to shop it around to Amy and whoever the right colleagues are to get some of that feedback. And so, I don't know, I guess I would just, in some ways, like once we get a certain amount, once we get something useful put down that we can pass over to Ben, we ought to also like just respect the department and the process that
Yes.
they work through,
Absolutely.
and not try to like do a
100%.
separate one
No.
outside of that.
And by the way, when I say go to the commission, that's what I mean, because that's what the process is that the economic development department, they take things to the commission,
Right.
like we don't take that, so that's what I,
Come with this.
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah,
But we
no, that's what I
we
meant,
want
is give it to
to-
them,
We
yeah.
want to rely on you guys.
And it goes past that too, once it gets to the general plan like that's a public process. That has to go. And I think that's another place where this Trail to Tomorrow ended up falling a little bit short, was the public didn't participate as much as we liked them to.
Yeah. But if we think of the Trail to Tomorrow and the creation of that as a document, as just a step along the way in this bigger process that we're continuing now, then there are more opportunities for community engagement that will prove very important along the way.
Yeah.
I think we're getting to the point in the meeting where you can tell me what you would like me to do now.
It sounds like
Sandwiches.
Melissa has offered to do a little bit of work on pulling ideas together, putting them on
Okay.
paper, shop it around to us. We'll add a little bit more feedback and give that to you.
Okay, great.
Does that sound good?
And that's language that we'll work on starting to incorporate in the general plan section.
Exactly.
Well, we want a little more feedback before we submit to the general plan, right? Like, are we gonna?
Before we submit, absolutely.
Yeah, we're gonna talk to, like, we're gonna share it, and then we're gonna share it with TCAP. I finally got it right. Right? I mean, I think that we do need to, I don't think we want to submit to the general plan without having had a conversation with them.
Not submit to, but like, let's do our part from like
Yes.
capturing what's happened in this meeting,
Right.
Yeah.
giving it to Ben to take a look at and offer some thoughts as to like, I think we need to take this to Amy right now because there's this important thing, whatever, I don't know. I mean, he has expertise
take
with
his
dealing with
advice.
departments, right?
Right,
So
got
let's hear what he suggests there.
Got it.
And probably it goes back to our board, our next board meeting,
Mhm.
before it gets sent off to other boards and things
Agreed.
like that, right?
Okay,
Like,
got it.
so
But
let's
can
just
we
like, we can
socialize?
decide, you know, we don't have to make all this decisions right now.
Sure.
We just have to have a couple next.
Could we socialize the idea with TCAP that maybe we have a meeting a month or a bi-monthly meeting that with them?
collectively or one
Once would
as
be a
a
lot, 'cause that would
exploratory?
be as much together as a part, but.
So a few thoughts on that. I think the first one is that, and I say this with kindness, TCAP is very much like you all, or if you ask for an inch, you'll get a mile. There's a lot of thought that goes on there. So I don't know how much we want to engage with them. I also think that, their statutory responsibility is very narrow and we have trouble even keeping them within those bounds. I think there's sections of this plan and relevant sections in the general plan that are worth their consultation. And there are some that they were part of the planning process for the strategic plan, and I don't know how relevant it is to go to the Travel Council Advisory Board and talk about other aspects of a healthy economy that don't necessarily involve our tourism product. And I understand that might fall into what we've been talking about with siloing, but I also just, for the sake of progress, want to just make sure that we're speaking to relevant people. There are other stakeholders. If there are other sections that you want input on, we have other stakeholders that I can think about connecting us with when it comes to, like, for example, land use and creating housing and commercial nodes. I think of the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. They're a great partner that we might want to speak to and inform some of this language. There are all kinds of stakeholders. I think consider TCAP to be one of them. And I don't know if their say is relevant on every section of what we've talked about today, but certainly some, and I'm glad to make that connection. I think that what might work is if you all assemble some language that you want them to review, what we can do is we can bring a couple of you to one of their meetings and have you sort of lead that workshop session or something.
Maybe it's not so much asking for consensus as it's asking for just some feedback.
Right. I think it's
That just
definitely.
feels a lot more reasonable,
Sure.
like of something that we can achieve, is we can get feedback, we may or may not be able to get consensus.
There's some pie in the sky stuff here that is gonna take years and is harder.
Mhm.
And then there's what we're gonna spend our tourism money on for 2025.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that having the meeting with them, with TCAP on that aspect of it,
Mhm.
is really important. And they're still gonna be in charge of everything they're in charge of.
Mhm.
We would just say, this is how we see it affecting the economy, and this is how we're breaking it down.
Yeah.
And what do you think?
Yeah.
And they, when I did the initial presentation to them, which was kind of tricky, the pushback came in the way of people's personal experience. So, what happens at the MIC? Who comes into the MIC? And are those people really, like, mountain bikers come into the MIC? Are they really mountain bikers? They're kind of dabblers, right? If you're a mountain biker, you don't go to the MIC, you go to a bike shop, to ask about trails. Like there's this, sometimes people have their own perspective on it. And so saying, okay, that's a piece of the picture, but let's paint the whole big picture. And so I think I've had a lot of conversations with a few folks, and I think they're starting to see, like, it's not all about soft adventure. There's hardcore adventure happening here too. And these different ways that how all these things relate are really important.
Mhm.
So I think drafting it, doing what you guys just said is a great way to move forward. But I think it's really important that people are asked for feedback, not necessarily consensus, but
Totally.
feedback. And we should make that as broad. Anyone who wants to talk about it, if you start trying to be too much like, we don't need to talk to everyone. Anybody that's interested, we should take their input.
Well, yeah, I think that's all heard, and I think
Yeah.
Jasmine, you may have broken up when you were saying this, but just as a reminder, this is gonna be a public hearing. Any change to general plan has to go through a public hearing process.
Yeah.
Everyone will get a chance to say something about it.
Right.
I just wanna make sure that the final draft product we deliver doesn't reach in too many directions and become too muddled. But I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I don't want to
We're trying to
silo
be
the
very
reaching out.
specific here.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to be muddled. We're trying to be very specific about how to maximize the economy and how to do the things that are long-term and short-term. And the short-term is, how do we invite people to Moab next year? How are we inviting people to Moab in the next 12 months?
Mhm.
That is a really important piece of driving all of this and understanding how it all works
Mhm.
and the role of trail mix and the opportunity, blah, blah, blah. So,
Mhm.
And I think that, yes, it's gonna go before the commission, but the more homework we can do, and the more stakeholders we talk to, and the more people feel that they've been heard, that's gonna make it a lot easier for the commission. So I guess the way I've been doing it lately is just like, go broad, don't be afraid to ask everyone what they want. I mean, it really, it makes such a big difference if people feel like they got to say that thing that they
I
want.
agree with that, Brian.
So,
So are you guys okay in terms of process? If I capture this and we'll do it, Google Slides and Google Doc, distribute it to this group so that everyone can give feedback and comment and whatever, and then we'll get a draft that this group feels good about. And then that's what can go back to the Economic Opportunity Advisory Board and anyone else that you would want to socialize that with.
That sounds great.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you're going through it, as you're going through writing this, as we're all going through looking at it, I think making notes throughout the different sections of what stakeholders we'd like to have looking at what sections would be helpful, just while we're actually
I rely
writing it.
heavily on you for that in
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
comment section.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because give it to anybody, I just don't know.
No, I mean, you're already taking away
You
a
should.
bigger action item than I thought you would, I'm happy to help you with this in many ways.
The most-
I might follow you and we could.
Yeah, that sounds great.
most effective congressional staffer I ever worked with on anything was a staffer who worked for Senator Baucus out of Montana, and it was a wilderness bill. Talk about controversy, right? And here's what he did. He went to every group and he said, what do you want? And he wrote it all down. What do you want? And he wrote it all down. He didn't say that's never gonna happen. He didn't say that's way out of the purview. He just said, what is it?
Yeah.
And he went to every single group. And then he came, and I was working on the mountain bikers and we asked for these things. And he comes back and he says, you asked for A, B, C, D, and E. You're gonna get A, B, and C, part of D, and not E. Are you in or out? And we're like, we are in, because if we say no, you get nothing. So there is this fear when you're trying to drive a process like this, that if you open it up too far, oh my God, like everyone will ask for all these things. But there's so much value in listening to everyone and letting them have that chance to talk, because it just really, even if they don't get it, they feel like they at least got to ask. And I think one of the biggest problems with our formal process at the commission is that you have 2 minutes and you feel like you have to go to the mat and ask for this way more than you actually need, right? And so I think if we can do some work where people feel like they were part of the process and I wanted this, it's not in there, but 80% of what I wanted, 75% of what I wanted is in there, then we can bring the commission something that has broad-based community support as opposed to bringing them a freaking.
But the lesson is not just the first part of what you said, which is the reaching out broadly. It's that he was reaching out broadly in a carefully curated, manicured way, so that you could ensure that you weren't going to just get blocked by the mire in multiple opinions.
Exactly.
Right? So it was still going to move forward, and that's the genius of it.
It was great. So anyway,
I would also just say it's the general plan is not very sexy. I would not overestimate people's interest in this.
Well, but
we do
if
need
trail mix is on the cutting block, chopping block, and that is part of this, which it is related to, that's gonna be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think it's related, but I don't know that this document is gonna be a make or break for the trail mix future.
Well, I gotta say, it is, because if people really understand the role of trail mix in our economy, that's gonna change the way, it is not some little user specific, I don't, it's, I
There's a
think
lot of
that's
opportunity, but it's it will depend on what's in this in the end and how it gets used.
Yeah.
I'm
But
taking your
it's a part of the
feedback.
process for sure.
Yeah, take
it.
notebooks, please.
Jasmine, I don't even know where to look to say goodbye. Is it there? Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
all the
Jasmine.
time.
Thank you all very much. This has been
Time
great.
today.
Thanks so much, guys.